All right, we have Sundar. For anyone else that's on the line, we are just waiting. What do we have? We have one, two, three, four. I guess we do have a quorum now. So maybe what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get started with the necessary script for remotely conducted open meetings. So this is Gary Trendle, Planning Board Chair. It is December 16th at 7:02 p.m. and I hereby call our Planning Board meeting to order. As a preliminary matter, permit me to confirm the members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. And I'm actually going to start with the staff because I am pretty confident they're here. So staff, after I state your name, please let us know if you're present. Mr. Gelsich.
John Gelsich, present.
Ms. Pemberton.
Stephanie Pemberton, present.
All right, and let's see, is Mr. Paradise here?
Phil is not joining us, but Stephen, who I thought I saw earlier,
I see Stephen
here in his place.
Hi, Stephen.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. And then members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Benson?
Present.
Is Muriel here yet? I don't see Muriel. I know she said she might be a little bit late. Is Jane here? Jane is not here yet. Dave Paul is not going to be here. Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, present.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg here.
Sundar?
Sundar Sivaraman, present.
Fran?
Randy, I'm present.
All right. All right. Well, again, good morning or good evening. I always do that. This open meeting of the Hopkinton Planning Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID virus, we are complying with the executive order that suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The executive order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as the public body makes provisions through adequate alternative means to ensure interested members of the public are provided reasonable access to the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment and will further include several public hearings. Asterisk. For this meeting, the planning board is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's web meeting calendar and the board's agenda identifying how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting is being broadcast through HCAM on multiple channels and platforms. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to the members of this body are available on the town's website via the web meeting calendar, unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. Just some quick ground rules. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will invite board members to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, for any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in dialogue with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Not every agenda item will feature public comment, but for those that do, all interested participants should use the raise your hand feature in Zoom, then wait to be acknowledged by the chair. All participants must begin by stating their name and address, and participants must limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. Finally, each vote taken in the meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. All right, and I see Miss Moran is here. Hi, Jane.
Hello, thank you.
All right, so our agenda this evening, we have a couple of a couple of administrative items. And John, I didn't see the minutes from December 7th, so I'm assuming we're not going to be reviewing those or not being discussing those tonight, or did I miss them?
Yeah, nope, it's my mistake. I put December 7th. They should have been November 30th. But since I advertised them wrong, we'll just move them to the next meeting on the 21st.
Yeah, we didn't. Yeah, got it. So we've got an A&R for 83 East Main Street. We have the hazard mitigation plan adoption notice. And then we're going to spend the bulk of our time on 0 Hayden Row, which is going to be chaired by Mr. DeYoung. And then we have a couple of other minor items. John, we didn't talk in advance, but specifically on the Zoning Board of Appeals notices, is there anything specific that we need to review there as a group?
No, these are something that we just kind of put in every memo. They're there for almost every meeting. It's just a courtesy from the ZBA that when they make a decision or they have a hearing notice, they pass them along to us. So we put them in the memo.
Shame on me, I don't remember. Oh, you know what? That's what happened here. I'm reading off of the contents, not off of the formal agenda, which would explain the difference.
Right.
Okay. And then the last item that we did want to talk through is future meeting dates for 2021.
We did that last meeting, I believe.
No, you're right. I was just looking at the meeting packet here, but you're right. We did. Okay. So let's go ahead and start with the A&R for 83 East Main Street. Oh, Fran?
Through the chair, just one thing on administrative, and maybe you were going to mention at the end, Gary, but I believe this Saturday, we do have a site walk plan at 9:30. So I didn't see it at the end. So again, you were probably going to mention it, but I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to.
Nope, that's great. Thank you, Fran. I had it in my notes and was going to send out a reminder, but certainly worth doing. That is over on South Street, and per the previous discussion, we can park in the lot that is across South Street from Dunkin' Donuts. But that's at 9:30 a.m. And given the snow we're supposed to get tonight and tomorrow, I'd encourage everyone to bring some warm boots.
Through the chair, silly me, I didn't keep note of the dates. I ended up going there and I almost texted you, Gary, but then I realized that I know Deb was not available. So I waited for 15 minutes and then drove away.
Well, good. You've already had a chance to see the site. So
the parking lot.
I will say, I am hopeful we can get through this stuff relatively quickly tonight. I think that ideally I'd love to get through and take a vote on 0 Hayden Row. We'll see if there's any other issues or mitigation that needs to come up. But if there aren't additional things, I'm hopeful we can get through that one, take a vote. And that'll also just help us maintain a little bit more manageable load on our next call, is this coming Monday. So we'll leave that up to Mr. DeYoung to see how he can move that along. But that's just my hope for tonight.
Gary,
So,
I'm sorry. This is Muriel. I apologize. Did you just say what is on the agenda for Monday?
I didn't go through that level of detail.
Oh, okay. All right.
No.
I'm sorry. I was a
Just
little
that,
distracted.
given that our last meeting of the year will be on December 21st, my hope is that we can get to a vote on 0 Hayden Road tonight, so that we can wrap up on Monday at a reasonable hour. Okay. 83 East Main Street, and who is going to be speaking on this? Is this Mr. McDowell?
Yes, I can speak to it if you'd like. Roy McDowell from Legacy Farms LLC. We have this before you this evening because, as some of you may recall, a year ago at town meeting, this section of what was Franklin Road and Peach Street was discontinued and voted at town meeting to discontinue it. At that point, it was also comes under the derelict fee statute, which I went over with Ray Mieris. And apparently the way the law works in that regard, when a road is in that status, the derelict fee status, the abutters to that road in those sections through the center line of the road, the ownership of that reverts to the abutters. In our instance, you'll see the lines where it's to the center of the previous road, and the other portion on the other side will revert to the mezzes. You'll also notice that we gave fee to the town of a portion of what was Peach on the corner, that pie piece, in a section of the frontage at 83 East Main. We gave to the town also for the widening of the street.
Okay. I think that makes sense to me. Does anyone on the board have any questions for Mr. McDowell?
Mrs. Muriel, I do not.
And if there are no questions, let's just quickly, Mr. Gelsich, any comments from the town with regards to this A&R?
Nothing of concern. I put the email thread from Mr. McDowell and Mr. Mieres in the folder, so you guys hopefully saw that. But that kind of outlines the process. As Mr. McDowell said, when this road is discontinued, they gain this property. This is more of a formality to just, you know, double bag the A&R and the lot line. So not necessary, but happy to do it if it makes everything a little bit clearer in the future.
Okay.
Through the chair.
Yes. Go ahead.
Why does the road get discontinued?
Through the chair, the road was relocated. The road was actually eliminated, and Legacy Farms Road North is actually the new road location.
Okay.
So you can see there the former Franklin Road. That's where the old road was, and
okay,
then that kind of pie shape down there.
Yeah.
John is highlighting, so they've relocated the road altogether.
Okay, got it. Thank you for clarifying.
Mm-hmm. All right, so if there's no further questions or comments, I will entertain a motion to grant the A&R for 83 East Main Street.
Sundar Sivaraman, so moved.
Rob Benson, second.
And if there is any questions or further discussion, seeing none, we'll move to roll call vote. Mr. Benson?
Rob Benson, yes.
Muriel?
Bill Kramer, yes.
Jane?
Jane Moran, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Sivaraman, yes.
Fran?
Fran DeYoung, yes.
And Gary Trentle's a yes, so the motion carries.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So, Mr. Chair and Mr. McDowell, it's going to be a little tough to get this endorsed given the weather. Town Hall is closed tomorrow, so we won't be there. So this probably won't be available until next week.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
John, do you still need people to come to town hall like Friday or Monday to sign it?
So I will be there Tuesday. So if people could come by Tuesday, that would be helpful. If you can only come by Monday, that's fine. I can stop in at town hall too. Friday's probably not going to be good because I don't know what the weather's going to be like, and I don't want to make anybody come out if the roads are still not great.
Okay, so per our previous process, if we can just use the email to kind of count off people, then that way we can hopefully not send anybody down to town hall and help make the signing process as efficient as possible.
Thank you.
John, on the hazard mitigation plan adoption notice, it's a very nice lengthy document. What do we need to do with that?
Nothing. I just wanted to let you guys know. So the hazard mitigation plan is something that FEMA and MEMA require for every 5 years, and it allows you to apply for grants specifically geared towards flooding and climate change adaptation and stuff like that. But this one is paired with the MVP process that we undertook. So it's a hazard mitigation plan / MVP report. And this is something that we had the workshop back in last December, went through all the processes, and then FEMA and MEMA reviewed it, deemed it approvable. The town had to adopt it, which happened on December 1st. And then you send it back to FEMA, and then they approve it. So just wanted you guys to have a copy of it. Wanted to let you know that we have finished that step in the process. And that has enabled us to apply for a grant recently, this past week, that is for the assessment of culverts around town for flood-prone areas through FEMA. Hopefully we get it. It's a very competitive grant, but we submitted a statement of interest and we're invited to apply, so that's a good sign. So now the application is in, and we will be able to apply for more grants such as that in the future because of this plan. And that project that we applied for was something that came out of the MVP process, so that's pretty good to see.
Any idea when we would hear an update from that grant?
I don't know. It closed on technically Friday, but they extended it to Monday. So I would imagine it's going to be a little bit of time, but hopefully not too long.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. Thanks for all the work on that. Yes, Sundar.
Through the chair. So the existence of a hazard
Sundar,
mitigation.
you are frozen.
Oh.
Oop, you're back.
Oh, sorry. So is it the existence of the hazard mitigation plan which qualifies us for this grant? Meaning the plan itself has roles and responsibilities, SOPs, people identified, like everything that in case there is a hazard, what kind of activities take place in the town? Is that
the hazard, through the chair, the hazard mitigation plan really identifies places in town that are prone to hazards, I shouldn't say prone to hazards, but prone to damage or consequences from hazards such as flooding, winter storms, high winds, high temperatures, that type of thing. And so the whole process leading up to having the full plan was analyzing the town in terms of those factors, figuring out where the weak spots are, where the strengths are, and then putting that into an action plan. It's not a super detailed action plan. It's kind of like the master plan where it gives, near, sort of near, and then far term goals.
okay?
But this is something that you need to update every 5 years and adopt from the town. So it's kind of the town saying, these are our priority projects for the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
And this is, some background information. And then once we do that, FEMA essentially says, okay, you've given it a good enough look that
Okay.
now you can use that plan as the basis to apply for grants that would satisfy some of the work that you've identified in the plan.
Got it. Thank you, John.
Okay. All right. So at this point, actually, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. DeYoung. And just as a reminder, we do need to still open this hearing. But I'll go ahead and let you do that if you're okay with it, Fran.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I will entertain a motion to open up the public hearing for 0 Hayden Road, the open space and land preservation development special permit.
So moved.
Rob Benson, second.
All right. We will go through roll call vote here. Ms. Marlowe.
Mary Larson Marlowe, I will be recusing myself, so I will mute now.
Very good. Mr. Trendle.
Yes. Trindle, yes.
Jane.
Jane Moran, yes.
Muriel.
Carol Kramer, yes.
Sundar.
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
And Deb.
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
And Fran DeYoung's also a yes.
And Rob Benson
Oh,
is a yes
Mr.
too.
Benson, you know what? I didn't see the video. So you videoed yourself out. So
Quickly forgotten. It's terrible.
Sorry. Trying to get some dinner in at the same time here. Sorry.
my apologies. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you, board members. Thank you, members of the public, as well as those who have a vested interest. I'm going to pick up where we left off from the December 7th meeting. And there are 3 updates that have come through, for lack of a better term, since that meeting on a couple things. Number one, the applicant has provided a revised conventional plan, which I'll have him speak to in a second. There's also an updated beta letter, which I'll have beta speak to shortly. That letter came in on 12/15 yesterday. And the third is, hopefully, John, there's an update from the Concom agent regarding that issue we brought up on the 7th. So the first of those updates, there's been a revised conventional plan submitted by the applicant. Joe, maybe I'll let you take a minute and just kind of explain the conventional plan?
Be glad to. Larry Green is also on the roster here tonight. We work together to pull this together, so it may be a team effort on this end. But generally what we tried to do was take the input we received from the board and from Phil over at Beta and rework the plan. Chiefly the concern regarding multiple wetlands crossings and the scope of the impacts to those resource areas. So the traditional plan that you saw before is now replaced with this plan that loops in along the Palini boundary line, crosses that area at the narrowest point possible to significantly reduce our wetlands impacts. You can see the big loop up in the northeast gives us access to 9 building lots. And then we return to a point back on Hayden Row greater than the 125-foot center line offset. The road is about 2,200 feet. And as I said a moment ago, provides the access to 9 building lots.
Got it. And could you point out to me that I believe there's 2 wetland crossing areas? Is that correct here?
Well, the road is side by side at the northwest corner of the Eddy property, right through there at the area where the wetlands is the narrowest, would be the smallest impact.
Yep.
I believe we're on the order of 3,200 square feet. 249 is the buffer zone disturbance. I believe the number 5,000 was something that Phil Paradis had mentioned last time. So we fall well below that standard.
Okay. So I see 2 wetland crossings here in the proposed area. And there are also, I believe, 2 stormwater basins, correct? One at the entrance off of Hayden Row, and the other.
There's a divide up near, kind of cuts through that center of that lot that's the big loop inside that circle. There's a divide there where a portion of the water would head northeasterly, away from College, away from Hayden Row, and the rest comes back southwesterly. So to provide 2 spots would allow us to handle the water more efficiently. We could probably bring it all back to 1 or take it all northeasterly to 1, but it seems to make a lot of sense to break up our stormwater, handle it more efficiently, less site work, not an overly large basin as we try to fit those in and make those fit the landforms, make them fit the project. So 2 smaller, generally a little easier to accommodate than 1 larger.
Understood. And then is there another stormwater basin at the entrance of the property off of Hayden Row?
Right. Yeah, one down between the roadways.
Yeah.
The first 100 feet from Hayden Row, then up top near the end of that bulb.
Perfect. Thank you. Go ahead.
We've proposed some replication that you see on the plan in line with guidelines we have developed after multiple trips to the Conservation Commission over the years. So we think that what we propose will be in line with their guidelines for these sorts of projects.
All right. Are there questions from the board regarding this is the conventional plan that was submitted?
Can we hear, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, can we hear how Beta's comments on that?
I have that. That's the next thing on the
Okay.
on my agenda, Mariel. So yeah, I was going to have any comments from the planning board members, then go to the Beta letter from December 15th, which addresses, I think, some of the comments. But that's a good segue if there's no other questions from board members.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm not a board member, but I was hoping to just clarify one thing with the applicant. And I think you had mentioned it. There appears to be 2 wetland crossings still, but in this area, the Concom agent and I were talking about the proposal. And if these roads are separated and there's a gap in between them, Concom would technically consider these two separate wetland crossings. So if the applicant is able to construct this, and Beta might be able to weigh in on this, if the applicant is able to construct this roadway so that it's essentially one culvert going through rather than a culvert, a gap, and then, it might be the same culvert, but another gap, that would be preferable to show only one wetland crossing similar to the OSLPD.
Joe?
Oh, it's certainly doable. The idea, I believe, with this was just to prove separation between the roadways. But if the commission members would rather see something that aligns more closely, has the one crossing, that's certainly something we could accommodate.
That would be one culvert that would span both those road systems. It would be theoretically one crossing.
I'm sorry, who just said it would be one crossing?
Larry Green, McCarty Engineering.
So, Mr. Chair, I think that we would need to have Concom verify that.
So, Mr. Chair, I did speak with the conservation administrator, and he was saying if it was if they were basically one roadway, even if it's two lanes, one roadway, it would be one crossing. If they're separated, essentially two bridges, you can't see my hands, two bridges like this rather than like this. They're like this, it's two crossings. If it's like this, it's one crossing. It's a technical thing, but that's how it was explained to me.
So, through the chair, can I ask a question?
Gary?
It seems like that's largely a technicality. I'm trying to think from, for the purposes of this plan, just showing that they can build a conventional plan. I would propose that maybe we just, if we're able to move forward tonight, if we were to condition that the plans be updated to show just one wetland crossing with no space between the inlet, between the two, the roads going in and the road going out. And I can't really think of any engineering reasons as to why they couldn't do that if they can show it as two separate roads with some space in between. So just to kind of keep things moving forward, I'd propose that that's something that we could condition, that they update these plans to show that, which helps keep things a little cleaner from our end.
I mean, I think that would be, it's acceptable to me, if it's acceptable to other board members, because then I think it would also align, I believe, with the concept plan. If I'm not mistaken, which is a single crossing, correct, John?
That's correct.
Yeah, I don't have any, through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have any real issue or sticking point with that, as long as we're sure that we're in good shape with the broadly, the Concom guidelines, since we don't have their formal weigh in.
Through the chair, is it possible at all to roughly draw out what John had shown as this versus this in this particular image, just for clarity? I mean, obviously that's not a formal thing.
Mr. Chair, if I could try and address that.
Sure, John.
It would essentially just be moving these lanes closer together,
Closer.
Gap
Okay.
right here, and just showing them essentially as like in the conceptual plan, it's one
Okay.
roadway. That would be really it. And I know this is a technical quirk, but we just had the issue with the two wetland crossings, and I just want to make sure it's all clear and everything is satisfied before we.
Okay, so John, there would be no gap at all. The two lanes would literally abut each other like this.
That would be what would be needed, yes.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Which I don't see why that wouldn't be done.
We can do that.
Okay. I think, Joe, if that's done in the manner with which John outlined, and we can kind of get that, and maybe to Gary's point, we can condition that or get that kind of approved or through with Concom, then I think it aligns pretty closely with what's in the concept plan, with ideally what we're looking to what you as the applicant are looking to move forward with, correct? All right, so if there's no other questions on the conventional plan map itself, I'd like to, I think Stephen from Beta is on, and I'd like to have him weigh in and also identify or kind of walk through any other noted elements in the letter from December 15th.
Yep. Hi, everyone. This is Stephen from Beta again. We don't really have too much to add compared to the previous letter. We reviewed the conventional plan. All the lots meet the requirements for frontage, lot area, yards, etc. The location of the septic systems makes sense. So really at this stage of development, it seems to meet the regulations. Obviously, we do a more in-depth review if it was approved and going to be designed. With regards to this crossing, it definitely makes sense to me to have the roads side by side. I guess the one question I am curious about is the intent under this current design to convey stormwater between those two roads to get to that southern basin, so that if you were to put the roads side by side, how would you get stormwater from the northern part of the site to that basin in the southern part? I mean, you could use catch basins, I suppose. I just don't know what your intent is.
So in reference to stormwater, so basically that crossing would almost act as a high point in the roadway, and then stormwater would flow back to Hayden Road, and the other stormwater would flow toward the end of the loop road. So we wouldn't be conveying stormwater through that crossing.
Okay, that makes sense. I wasn't sure if it was supposed to be a swale or not. So that wouldn't be a problem. Yeah, so in that case, we don't really have any comments to add, just that it does meet the lot area, frontage, other dimensional requirements.
Okay, thank you on that. Any questions to Beta regarding their assessment on the December 15th letter? And then a third update, John, I don't know if you already mentioned it in terms of, the ComCom agent feedback. I think you mentioned it, but if you could just repeat it just so we've got them.
Yeah, so we had asked the conservation administrator for some opinions on the previous conventional plan. They're not necessarily relevant now because this one has been submitted, but the comments were, and I apologize, he was supposed to get me something written, but that didn't happen. The comments he told me verbally were that while that could have been possible with the two wetland crossings, the way that the Wetland Protection Act is written, it gives discretion to the CONCOM. So it's not a given that if something is designed in that certain way, it's going to get approved. The CONCOM would still need to approve it, and it's essentially a subjective approval. Again, don't really know how much that matters because this revised conventional subdivision plan has been submitted, and I believe they're abandoning the previous through road one. So that's where we stand.
Got it. All right. So we'll have to get the CONCOM approval on that. All right. Any other questions before I move into the public hearing outline from board members?
Jane Moran here. I have one through the chair.
Yes, Jane.
Gary mentioned that this plan would be one way in and one way out, but the design looks like both roads are two ways. Can somebody clarify that?
Joe, you want to address that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I can just comment. I didn't. Sorry, I didn't mean to imply that there was one way in and one way out. I was just responding to the fact that there's two roads that connect it. So if yeah, I didn't.
Okay, thank you. That answers it.
I apologize.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to then move to the public hearing outline and the discussion. We've gone through the discussion of a review of decision criteria, and then we'll move into the discussion of waivers. There is one thing on the decision criteria, John, that I just want to clarify, and this is 210.115A point E. It looks like A through D, we've checked the box on that they are in accordance with standards. But E, the parcel could be developed as a conventional subdivision plan under existing state and federal land use regulations. Is that indeed the case? I believe it is, but I want to confirm.
With this new plan, it appears that that is the case. As long as sorry, Mr. Chair, as long as they include that condition to revise the plan to show the roads essentially put together rather than separated.
All right. Make sure I'm just making a note on the condition so we don't forget it at the end. All right. Any other questions from the board on decision criteria and the review of that? All right. So the discussion of waivers. So waivers, I believe, John, as I look through the material, a lot of the waivers, or a couple of the waivers that have been requested, have been withdrawn for sidewalks and then travel width of less than 20 feet based on the revised plans. But there is still the waiver on buffer width. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
All right. So I think I know where the waiver request is, but I would ask the applicant, maybe Joe, you could just refresh everyone's memory there for the buffer request. I believe it's adding up to next to one of the abutters as they're coming in off the road. Is that correct?
Correct. That's the key in all of this, trying to be cognizant of concerns we'll have at other boards, chiefly the Conservation Commission. This will need a permit from that group. As we set this up, the idea was to cross the wetlands at the spot with the least amount of disturbance. That would be fairly close to the northwest corner of number 5 College, the Eddy property. So in that location, we felt it best to reduce the buffer there and cross it at the best spot. And then once you do that sort of thing and try to maintain minimum centerline roadway widths to stay in conformance with subdivision regulations to allow traffic to flow more easily, to avoid sharp corners, then you take that first 100 and 200 feet of roadway coming off Hayden Row Street, and the tendency is to push it southeasterly. So that first, up to the crossing, the first 400 feet of roadway, it's all a function of trying to cross the wetlands at the best spot, if you will. So that pushed us to request the buffer for the roadway.
And the buffer is 100 feet there? Am I correct on that?
Northerly of the Eddy property, you're out the back door of the Eddy property, we're 100 foot wide there.
Yeah.
It's at that corner, the northwest corner of the Eddy property, our roadway at station 4 plus 60 is below that 100-foot minimum.
Got it. So how much is the buffer actually, right? If the minimum is supposed to be 100, what are you requesting a waiver for approximately how much distance or space?
Larry, you know that number off the top of your head? Perhaps you'll...
Yeah, as he's looking that up, I think it's just helpful for board members to provide or have some degree of context with what we're being asked to waive.
Mr. Chair, also, not to interrupt you, but just to let you know too, Mr. Nation has his hand raised.
Oh, wow, I cannot see that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Ron Nation, I'll unraise my hand. It was for an earlier question. Sorry.
Was it a comment or just a question, Mr. Nation?
It was a comment regarding the one crossing versus two, and my comment was unneeded at this point. But it would have been very difficult to build that as two crossings, as they both really connect. But whatever.
I think I understand. And I apologize for not, I just don't have visibility into who's raising a hand. Not that I was ignoring it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Joe.
that number is generally, and it's a scale number, it's about 20 feet. Right there where John has the cursor.
Okay. Got it. So we're pretty close to the northwest corner of the property, of the Eddy property.
Correct.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I ask a question? I don't know if you can give an answer to this, but I'm just curious. If you were to increase that buffer, how might that impact the wetland area that is impacted? And I'm just trying to get some scale. If it's going from say 3,200 feet to 3,600 feet, or if it's going, if you were to increase that buffer zone, if it went from 3,200 feet to 5,200 feet, just trying to get some perspective as to how much the wetland narrows there. And as I just having a hard time seeing it on this chart here.
Yeah, that's a hard answer to give you off the cuff. You may recall during our site walk, we walked through that section where the center line was going through, and we were perhaps 15 foot wide with the wetlands there. If we were to move the road northwesterly away from the Eddy property, quick scale of the plan gets us to about 40 foot wide.
Okay.
If we were to flop the road over 40 foot northwesterly, we go from 15 odd feet to 40 feet wide. So we start to jump. Wetlands separates, gets larger. The westerly edge pulls closer to Hayden Row, then those numbers are going to jump.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's just helpful to try and understand the trade-offs that we're making here. I understand the desire to minimize the wetland impact. It was just helpful to understand how much it's impacted if we moved further away from the corner of the Eddy property there.
Gary, and I think that's kind of the crux of the discussion, right? Given that's the only waiver request that the applicant has put forth here. The trade-off, impact on the wetland versus the proximity to the Eddy property. And I'd like to have other members of the board weigh in on that. Are they fine with where it's at? Or is there a strong desire to look at it one way or the other?
Mr. Chair, this is Muriel.
Ms. Kramer, the floor is yours.
I have a real hard time thinking about such a minimal buffer between the developer and a property owner. We have minimized buffers before very often to a budding property that isn't a neighbor with their own property. And I just 20 feet just doesn't seem like we're really doing the job.
It kind of feels like it's on top of the abutter. And I'm kind of in that camp a little bit, especially given the fact that yes, there's a wetland to the northwest, but if there was the ability to move it to a certain degree and extend that buffer away from the Eddy property, so instead of 20 feet, pick an arbitrary number closer to 80 feet, or something closer to 100 feels a little bit better to me.
Yeah. It's also, for me, it's not just this plan, it's any plan that comes forward. I mean, the buffers are there for a reason, and the wetlands protection guidelines are there for reasons. But I really feel like we need to really contemplate respecting the buffer zone to a neighboring residential property owner.
Through the chair, this is Rob.
Please.
My initial thoughts are there's probably a conflict here between the Conservation Commission and their desire to preserve as much of the wetlands as possible, and the planning board's own desire to preserve the wetlands and the buffer width. And we're in a situation where we're trying to make a judgment here. I guess I'm curious if the applicant has any feedback from the Conservation Commission on. I would think they would have, if they've talked to them so far, they would say this plan minimizes conservation or wetland impact. Has that happened?
No, it has not. What has always been difficult, as you can imagine, as you convene tonight, to head off to the Conservation Commission, we'll have to talk in generalities. It's hard to get them to commit to a hard line when we don't have a proposal in front of them. So generally, we'll acknowledge that land disturbance is better than more. To do what we can to replicate what is lost to certain standards. The more replication is better than less. Those general ideas, but without a specific proposal, it's hard to get a specific answer. So would you go for the concept, and can we take this back to planning to ease their concerns? That's a hard thing to do. So a formal proposal would get a formal answer. Are we at that point?
Yeah.
Could I have one more question through the chair?
Sure, Rob.
The conventional plan, the buffer space, the buffer requirement does not exist in the conventional plan. So in the conventional plan, they can have the roadway they can have it closer to the property, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
I think so, yeah.
There are buffers.
Is it 100 feet? Is it 100-foot buffer?
With the conventional, we could go, Mr. To the chair,
Yeah.
with the conventional, we could go up to 0 feet.
Okay.
I do also want to add that in this area, we are proposing extensive landscape buffering at this pinch point. And also just to give you another visual scale, that the abutting house is approximately 180 feet away from that crossing, just to give you a visual as well.
Ron Nation, another point is that the 20 feet or whatever it's scaled to is at a point. So it only gets better from the 20 feet. The 20 Screeny Eddy property, and again, it's a point, yeah. And it's only one little point where it's 20 feet, and from there it gets larger.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I understand that point, and I'm just going to say that I still struggle with 20 feet, and I will tell you that that I know for a fact it will come back to us, and it'll be very hard for us with a future applicant to say yes, but that was just at one point. I think that we're making a decision that's pretty sweeping. I do want to hear from if they would like to speak from the property owners before.
I was going to open it up to the public here in a second. I just want to get a flush out anything from the board members, but that's a good point, Muriel. Thank you, Rob, for your comments. Any other board members have a comment or a thought on the waiver?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Trendle.
So through the chair, I have a question for Mr. Gelsich. And I'm just curious if he has any guidance here for how we can most effectively work with the Concom to come to an agreement, to come to evaluate the trade-offs here. Because at the end of the day, I think we are all interested in, in maximizing that buffer. So hopefully so that it complies with our bylaws. I realize that they have a slightly different set of priorities, but we could ask the applicant to redesign this and increase that, and then Concom's going to say, well, we want you to straighten the road and minimize the impact. And case in point, I think we went through that on Whisper Way, where Concom was pushing to cut further into the buffer zone to minimize wetland impact. So I'm just wondering if, from a process perspective, if you have any guidance for us on how we can best come to agreement with Concom as to what we would like the applicant to do here.
So through the chair, it's kind of a difficult question to answer because I think Mr. Marquardon spoke to that pretty accurately. Is that the Concom is not going to give you a concrete answer unless they have a concrete proposal in front of them. They don't like to talk in hypotheticals, and I think that's just kind of something that happens with all conservation commissions, just because of the way the Wetland Protection Act is written. From what I've seen and what I've heard in the past, their primary goal is to reduce wetland impacts. So the proposal that is going to have the least impact to wetlands is going to likely be the one that they're going to want to move forward with. They don't necessarily care about buffers. They don't necessarily care about neighbors and abutters. And I don't say that to be mean or condescending. It's just that's not the focus of their review. The planning board's focus of their review is to make sure the project fits with the neighborhood. The Concom's focus is to make sure the wetlands are protected. And that doesn't really factor in abutters. So if the argument is, well, we want to have more of a buffer between the abutters and therefore there's going to be greater wetland impacts, I doubt they're going to go for that.
Yeah, so through the chair, can I just respond
Gary.
to that though? Because I think that at the end of the day, Concom also has some of the same perspective that we do, and that the applicant can always go back to the conventional plan, which not only might have more, or effectively eliminates the buffer requirement here, but also would have more wetland impact because the road is going to be 2x as wide. So I agree with you, but I also just like there has to be some way that we can get a little bit more alignment here. And I hear you that they're not going to respond without a plan, but.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could address that argument as well. Talking with Don McAdam, the way that the Concom looks at the limited projects, and I believe this would still be considered a limited project because the only access is through wetlands, they look at alternatives to the proposed plan. So if they came before the Concom with a conventional plan, they know that this OSLPD is a viable alternative to that conventional plan, and they could basically deny the conventional plan and say, no, you need to go with this alternative because it's got fewer wetland impacts. So they can look at the alternatives and compare them against the current proposed plan. They don't have to approve the current proposed plan if it's a conventional plan just because that's what's before them.
So hopefully there's a degree of pragmatism on both sides, and it can be a meeting of the minds. I'd like to, if the abutters are on, and I think I saw Mr. Eddy on, I would, if he's open to it, if he has any thoughts on that as well. John,
can you hear me?
We can hear you. Mr. Eddy, could you state your name and your address for the record?
Wayne Eddy, 5 College Street. I'm the abutter on the south part of the property there. So that conventional plan that you showed with the 2 roads, that completely eliminates the buffer between my property and this proposed subdevelopment. So I don't know if that's the desired plan for the builder, or if this proposal that I'm looking at on the screen now is the desired plan. It's hard to really, it's really hard to get an idea of what this will look like, the road on the northwest corner, until it's built. I mean, that 20 feet is, it is pretty far away from the corner of my house, and it's in the wetland area. So I don't know how much impact that's going to be on us in terms of a visual issue. And there's a proposal on the landscaping plan there to kind of hide it. So, I mean, just looking at the plan, it looks acceptable from my standpoint, especially in comparison to the conventional plan that puts a house, basically right in the end of my backyard. Well, yeah, in the end of my backyard. So,
right.
It's all. Right. I mean, if ideally, it would be great if you could kink the road and extend that 100-foot buffer.
Okay. So what the plan that you're seeing here is ideally the concept plan that the applicant would, if they have their druthers, would be the way that they would like to move forward, right, before the definitive plan. To your point, provides a little bit more buffer than the conventional plan does. And Mr. Nation talked about some of the additional landscaping at that point area to further shield, the roadway and your property. So, I mean, Mr. Nation, could you talk? I see a few shrubs that look like they're proposed there, but would that extend through that area of the point, or maybe you just?
Yeah, it certainly could extend through that area. But so while everyone's talking, I'm measuring from the corner of Eddie's, the corner of their house to the roadway at the pinch point.
Yep.
It scales the same as from the end of Wayne Eddie's deck to the first house, to the house on lot 9. So, I mean, and that's a result of Eddie's yard being, of property being. That out there just as an observation. We can certainly bush that up heavier than it is shown on the plan. And as someone just said, it's a preliminary plan and a work in progress. So I want to do anything I can to keep the Eddies happy.
So those plantings are conceptual nature, so we can do multiple tiered plantings to increase that buffer.
Mr. Chair, the fire chief also wanted to make a comment.
Thank you for notifying me, John, of a raised hand in the audience. Chief Slayman, you got a comment?
Yes, thanks. I'm not actually sure how to raise my hand here. I'm still learning some of this, but thank you. I think my comment is kind of the assessment of the access with a conventional plan, and then the assessment, with the, I'll say the initials right here, the OSLD, the rest of it. The one I'm seeing today looks different than the first one I saw, and the one I'm seeing today is a conventional plan. Strikes me, especially when you're talking about the wetland crossing area, as becoming one road. Now, I know there's some width here, but I'm trying to look into the reasoning of the assessment in public safety of separate roads versus a single road that's a dead end. The dilemmas are like that when you have one road or one way in, it's what hazards are created in that one piece. And there's things like trees, which this might not have a lot of. There's things like a gas main that might be there. I think that's kind of the one that I'm like assessing here. When you have the two roads here coming together and a gas main and a water main, I don't know if it's a looped water main that's in this design or a single, but that makes a difference if we have a water main break. If it's a loop, then they can tend to be able to shut it off in an area and then there's still water going to the other area. So I'm having a little bit of trouble discovering all of that in this assessment. And my take to it is that, you're creating a boulevard, but it's not like a road that would have two access points. So in a conventional road, we have a limit to that of 500 feet, and that's what I feel like we're kind of avoiding some of that from a public safety perspective. So I just feel like I have to share that with you. And I didn't really, not just seeing this tonight, that's what I get out of the conventional plan. Thanks.
All right. You were on the docket here to kind of go through. You jumped in a little bit early, but it's good that you brought up those points. I can let the applicant, maybe Joe can speak to the chief's comment, but then I want to circle back and I'd like to kind of, let's see if I can really kind of wrap up the waiver issue on the buffer zone. So Mr. Markwood, maybe I'll open it up to you or Mr. Nation just to address the chief's comment.
Joe?
Yes. Concern with water and gas, it's a bit premature on the designs here on our end. The fact that we're still at concept stage. There would be a push, I think, at the water department to loop that water main. However, it's whichever the conventional or the concept plan, the water would loop would be separate. So if there's concern that one location, one unfortunate incident would shut down the access through both roadways, I suppose there could be something, as you stated a moment ago. We're in the middle of the field at that point. I don't believe we've reached the tree line yet, or just barely reached the tree line. So I guess the potential for issues does exist. Hard at this point to sit there and say that you'll have a water problem or you'll have a gas problem. We just haven't planned those out yet.
Chief, I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, but at least it was an initial response and acknowledgement from the applicant.
Yeah, and I think through the chair, you can decide if you want me to comment later. My suggestion to the board is, that is part of the reasoning when we have these lengths, 500 feet or 1,000 feet. And if we're going to adapt to anything in that length, we need to understand this criteria. So if it's too early in the designing phase, I get concerned that you're accepting all of this and we haven't gotten to some of the crux. So I appreciate that. That's probably an ongoing comment, and I'll hold off until later. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
The 1,000-foot cul-de-sac that is on the concept plan is in line with the OSLPD regulations. There's a bit of a history lesson. There had to be some motivation 25 years ago when the OSLPD was adopted to allow developers to choose this means to deal with their properties. So a loop road to your homes, change that mindset, set aside more land. Something had to be offered to them to get back to where they needed to be from a profitability standpoint. That's the reason that I guess the carrot and the stick, you allow the 1,000-foot long roadway, is the fact that we can still have a financially feasible project. So the 500 in the traditional, sure, I respect that, but the 1,000 that Larry has on his plan is not out of the ordinary. It's right in line with the regulations.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could also hopefully clarify something. This is not the final step of this whole process. This is a special permit. If this special permit is approved, Chief, they're going to have to come back with a definitive subdivision plan, which will then get reviewed through that whole subdivision process, through the subdivision, in view of the subdivision regulations, and all those utility and access things will get vetted there as well. This is really a process to see if this could even be built according to the OSLPD regulations. And then all the details, the finer details, get worked out at a later stage of the process. And Mr. Chair, I also want to point out that our consultant has raised their hand.
Mr. Consultant, please,
Hi.
Stephen?
Yeah, my comment was actually relating to the landscaping. So if you had any more to address on this length issue, I can speak up again in a moment, unless you're all set with this discussion.
Unless it was, only if it's landscaping that pertains to the pitch point that Mr. Nation spoke to, jump in there. But if it's just a general discussion or comment on landscaping, I believe that's in section 7.4.2 of the public hearing outline.
Yeah, so just, I guess, a quick comment or suggestion regarding the pitch point. I've just been reading the section of the bylaw that the waiver is being requested for, 210-113-C-1. And it seems to me that the intent of this requirement is that the property is adequately screened, which I'm sure the board's aware. So on other projects I've done and been involved with, usually with screening issues, we might require a visualization or a profile or cross-section be done just to show that the property, even if the buffer is less than it's supposed to be, then it's still not going to be visible from the nearby residents on the property line. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something the board's considering, requiring that as a condition before it's approved to make sure that the plantings that the applicant is proposing will actually be sufficient, even with the reduced roadway width.
So I was thinking about this as the different folks were speaking. You know, if we could increase the buffer width to maybe 50 feet, add some additional screening plantings that, you know, Mr. Nation spoke to, that provides some additional buffer area for Mr. Eddy. Hopefully Muriel, it kind of, we're taking a haircut. And the thought would be that, you know, COMCOM would also look at it from, you know, a little bit of, you know, pragmatic negotiation, that both sides are giving a little bit here, but it's something that all parties would be amenable to, both abutters as well as the COMCOM folks and the applicant / developer themselves. So is that a feasible option? Let me ask Mr. Marco, not Mr. Nation, if we could increase that buffer from call it approximately 20 feet to 50 feet, add some additional shrubbery or screenage, and that way we can allow you to go back to CONCOM with a plan that you know, said, hey, we're making a good faith effort to reduce or minimize the impact on wetlands. We're not taking it down to zero. If they wanted, you know, it's not going to happen. If they wanted to go back to the conventional plan, you know, I don't think you can have your cake and eat it too.
Through the chair,
Sundar.
Yeah, I have a question, and this might come across as crazy. If one of the objectives of the buffer is screening that the abutters property needs to have to the road, is there any ability for us to condition this on, if the abutter so chooses, to have additional planting within their own property, meaning towards that corner, the northwest corner within the abutter's property, where, you know, could is that even feasible to talk about?
I don't think that we should put the burden on the abutter to.
Oh, no. I don't mean it's the burden on the abutter. I mean, could the applicant take the responsibility of those plantings, if at all that's feasible, if that was okay with the abutter?
That would be a discussion between the applicant and the abutter.
Okay.
So through the chair, we can ask the applicant to contemplate that and condition it. I mean, if all things went forward, I think that has been done many times in the past, that applicants, as part of the decision, will do some plantings in accordance with the property owner's wishes.
Sure. No, I'm not opposed to that. My thought was if we added some additional buffer, that's just more area. I get it, right? It's a trade-off here, right? So
yep.
We can do all three. Right?
Yeah, just in the interest of answering Sundar's question, whether or not it's something we wanted to do, it is something that theoretically we can do and have done.
Is there any, Joe, regarding that potential idea of increasing the buffer zone a little bit there and adding some additional screenings, is that something that is feasible?
Puts us in the unenviable position of being the ping pong ball between two groups. You say widen it, as John mentioned a moment ago. Conservation pushes back and says, I saw a scheme where it was a lot less. So we're trying to serve two masters. That's what strikes me off the top is here we are chasing something between two groups that I wonder if there is a common ground.
Ron Nation. So I see, just from looking at this 11 by 17 plan, that that maybe a 10-foot move to the northwest would be doable. I'm not sure if you agree with that, Joe, but you know, perhaps rather than doing that, maybe I can strike a deal with Wayne Eddy to allow us to plant, you know, a little bit on the corner of his property, but so that we don't have the fight with Concom. But whatever, I'm totally open for anything that makes sense.
Yeah,
it seems like a simple problem.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, Mr. Nation, I'm just trying to put forth an equitable proposal that could work for everybody. I don't think, you know, it's one of those ones where nobody's going to be 100% happy, but I think if we can put together something that, you know, puts everybody in a good light, again, I'd like to kind of be able to kind of address the waiver concern. So our is 10 feet, moving it 10 feet, a place that the planning board members would be okay with? Again, moving it from approximately 20 to 30 odd feet, adding additional screenings on the applicant's property, but also have the applicant speak with Mr. Eddy if there was the need or the desire for additional plantings on his property to help shield that pinch point.
Through the chair, Fran, this is Rob.
Yes.
I think it's exactly what Joe said. 10 feet maybe is better, but as I look at just this plan, I think they could move it 100 feet, but then they're going to be, then the Conservation Commission is going to have probably more. I think they could provide a 100-foot buffer without a problem, but then they'd run into Conservation Commission issues. I really don't. It's an unenviable situation trying to kind of debate against another board in town when we don't know exactly what their thoughts are. We're trying to do a balancing act, and we're the only ones trying to balance here. I don't have.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I think we want to be very careful about doing another board's work for them. I think that we're taking into account the constraints of the site with the wetlands, but it's ultimately, it sounds, I don't mean it to sound awful, but it's really not our problem to solve if the property is difficult to navigate and develop. As I say that, I am mindful of the fact that the Eddies seem that the most impacted neighbor is amenable to working with the developer in this case. And I don't, you know, I think that we want to be very careful if we were to approve this, that we are really explicit in the decision that that we were not particularly comfortable with the 20-foot buffer, the 80-foot, you know, waiver. But these are the reasons why we considered it and approved it or disproved it. But I think we just want to be really explicit. But I'm particularly mindful that the most affected abutter is more in favor of this idea.
Mr. Chair.
Okay. Yeah. John or Gary?
Yeah, and I agree with Muriel on this. I do, just from a process perspective, it's a little frustrating to me that the Concom can kind of dig in and maximize their benefit, and yet we're the ones that have to sort of balance out these different needs. And to Muriel's point, maybe they will or maybe they won't. But in this situation, from my perspective anyways, there's a clear rationale to waive this buffer. Because number one, we recognize that it does minimize the wetland impact. Number two, the impacted abutter is, you know, is comfortable with it. Number three, you know, it sounds like there's some willingness to further increase the screening, which, you know, the reality is the intent of the buffer is to screen anyways. So I feel like there's enough remediation here that I can get comfortable with it. So that's my perspective, but I still struggle with this idea that we're compromising something, but I think in this situation, I think there's a pretty solid rationale to make a compromise here.
All right. Do other board members feel the same as Mr. Trendle?
And not to complicate it, but here I go, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. We haven't even talked about the safety considerations that the chief put forward. And that also bumps up against the safety considerations, I mean, the wetlands considerations. And so at the same time, we are contemplating allowances for or against safety considerations in effect, even though we aren't really talking about them. So it's a multifaceted complexity, I believe. And I don't necessarily want a runway in and a runway out, right? That isn't necessarily in keeping with the master plan. But a really long roadway that doesn't have an exit, two separate entrances is problematic.
It is. Any other thoughts from board members?
Through the chair, I was in agreement with both Mr. Trendle and Mr. Kramer until the latest comment Muriel introduced. It does seem like the abutter is willing to work with the applicant really, and I think I made my earlier point about screening being the number one objective of the buffer, and B, seemingly having multiple options to mitigate that.
Yeah.
Through the chair.
Yeah, is that Deb? Yes, Deb.
Hi, yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, and about the concern for the buffer and the concern for maintaining some reasonable buffer from the wetland. But I have some questions as to whether it's really an open space plan that they're providing. It's really not land that people are going to access because it's wetland. So I'm not convinced that it's really addressing the true characteristic of the definition of that type of plan. I'm wondering if the applicant could speak to that.
Well, I guess I disagree, Deb. We have set aside 55% of the site as open space in large chunks and generally in compliance with the 100-foot width minimum. And of that open space, less than half is wetlands. And that's in line with the bylaw.
Okay,
It's identified.
it's less than half, so it's like 40%. But my concern, though, Joe, is it looks like it's surrounding the site. And is it something that people will actually use as trails?
You know what, Joe, before you answer that, Deb, I want to kind of hold that comment because that really looks like it's at 7.1, right? Where the development meets the purpose of the open space and the landscape preservation development. I think that's where your question probably served. So I think it's relevant, but I think it really falls within 7.1.
But okay, then to just address specifically the buffer question,
yes,
that was sort of my overall, like sort of my thought, but walking the site really helped a lot in understanding the wetland terminology. But so that's sort of a trade-off as well. But to address the buffer question, to me, because the conventional plan would have a 0 lot tolerance in the and the buffer plan here has 40 feet or 20 feet, then I really think, and it's a flat, it's a flat definition, it's a flat roadway. I just don't mind that disturbance at all. I think that if you're gonna put a road in that either whether it's a conventional plan or whether it's this OSPLD, did I use the right? That I think it's justified. Unfortunately, it does not stay with the regulations, however, but I think that because it's so close in that area, I think it's to me it's passable.
Right. Anybody else? Any other comments from board members? If there's anybody I missed, from there, Jane, if you have any thoughts on it as well. I am in favor of granting the waiver here. I think for the comments or to the points that were already articulated here, I think, Mr. Nation, to any extent we can kind of increase that pinch point width from 20 to 30, as you mentioned there, that would be ideal. And with additional screening on that pitch point, I would be okay with, I would also be okay with granting the waiver for that. All right, so any other comments on the waiver? Otherwise, I will look to move on to 7.0 for other discussion criteria. All right, 7.0. Deb, you're probably the first one here. A special permit shall be granted only if the planning board finds each of the following. Number one, the development meets the purpose of the open space and landscape preservation development as described in 210.106. So, Deb, I know you kind of raised that question. Joe provided a response that 55% is open space, about half of that is wet. I believe, Mr. Gelsich, that the development does meet the purpose of the open space and landscape preservation development as described, but feel free to jump in.
Yeah, looking at the purpose, it does seem to meet that. And I just want to point out that it is not the purpose of OSLPDs to make open spaces that are preserved publicly accessible. The open space can be reserved, can be owned by the HOA with a CR placed on it, enforceable by the town, but that doesn't grant the public access over it. There's no requirement to put trails on the open space. There's no requirement to do anything that would allow for passive recreation. So while that would be a very awesome gesture for the applicant to do, it's not a requirement, nor is it a purpose of the OSLPD. And I just want to make that clear to the board.
Any other questions on 7.1? All right, any hands raised, which I cannot see? No, we good, John? All right, 7.2, 7.2.1, vehicle and pedestrian traffic flow and truck traffic flow. And I think maybe this is where the chief's comment, I could bring that to light and address any other questions or issues on vehicular or pedestrian traffic flow. Okay. So, Chief, if you're still there, I think I saw you.
He's here.
All right, awesome. Maybe now, just if you could just refresh that comment or summarize that comment that you mentioned before. Let's focus more on the waiver at the time. But your point was important and relevant. I'd like to just bring it back to the forefront.
Yeah, I think the purpose of my comment is, and if I understand the process right, is the conventional plan and its access road was what I was looking at, and I guess if that has to be acceptable in order to allow you to get into this other plan, that's what I'm trying to get in the conversation. The road to me, I don't know, I'm struggling looking at the road and seeing, like, if we were just going to build a conventional road like that, I don't think it meets the intent of what we would do. Because when you narrow it, it introduces these hazard conditions that I would think we wouldn't call as acceptable of having a two-way road. So that's just a question to the board, whether that gets you into the point whether we can now look at, and the reason I think it's important for me is the first conventional plan I looked at, it had two access points. The driveways were shorter to the residents. The water main went through, and those are all wonderful things from my narrow perspective. And when I look to the other one, now that this brings us to, I said, oh, look, I'm selfish. We're giving up the public safety points from my perspective where this leads us to. So, this, I guess, in this plan now, the two access roads are a lot closer. So this one almost throws me for a loop whether it even qualifies. It's different than the first one I reviewed and commented on. So that's what I'm bringing to the board. Just whether this conventional plan is even okay for you. And I apologize because I'm still learning this process. So if that's a move point, then kick me and I'll be quiet.
No, not at all. I mean, this is a revised conventional plan submitted on December 4th. And Joe can speak to the reasons why they revised the conventional plan. Let's call this conventional plan number 2 versus number 1. There are a couple differences that the chief points out, but there's a couple other things that I think are on this revised conventional plan that's I'd say beneficial for the applicant or addresses some of the questions that came up initially.
Joe,
Ron or Joe, could you comment?
Yeah, Joe, I just maybe prod you along here. Am I mistaken? I don't believe this is a one-way road. There's a 20-foot wide.
Two-lane traffic throughout the entire network on the conventional on both plans.
So same as the original plan.
Right.
The original through road, which this is a through road. I guess I'm not understanding, Chief, why this one is different from the other, or it doesn't conform with whatever.
So,
not trying to be argumentative.
No, I'm all for this conversation. Am I good, Chair, to respond?
Yes, I'm sorry. Chief, go ahead.
And again, that's what I want, a conversation on this. The first one I looked at, the entrances were spread out. And the way this proposal brings the roads together, in my opinion, it removes some of the aspects of public safety. And I tried to use some examples for you. The way the gas line might run, the way the water main may run, whether you may loop it or not. These all come into the equation when you you're literally creating a boulevard in one area of the conversation as I understood it. And then I would argue to you, you've created a single road, and I'm not looking for you to make a 40-foot wide one-way road, because again, that doesn't necessarily eliminate everything that happens in public safety. It does make it better for me to get an apparatus by or lay a supply line, but if the gas main breaks in that road, you lose the road. And I'm just trying to assess that in this conversation. So I like this open dialogue. I don't think it's a deal killer, but to me, if that's what gets us to something that's a longer road eventually, and again, I wasn't there 25 years ago, but you would have heard me bringing up I think we look at public safety a little bit hotter today, and that's what I'm introducing into the conversation. So thank you for that opportunity.
No, thank you, Chief. Mr. Nation?
Well, yeah. Yes, I understand, Chief. So we don't want to build this road. We're just putting that road down because it to comply with the rules and regulations to build the road that we want to build, which is the open space subdivision, the 1,000-foot cul-de-sac. It complies with the rules and regulations, and the town engineer has, certified that. And I don't know. We're just trying to comply with the rules and regulations. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I don't want to argue, certainly.
Yeah.
But Mr. Chair, could I jump in?
Please, John.
And clarify. So the conventional subdivision plan in this situation is really only used to determine the number of lots that can be developed for the OSLPD. I think the criteria is that the conventional plan is approvable. And then once that's established, then we move on to the OSLPD plan as really the main focus of the conversation, with the number of lots that were generated from the conventional subdivision plan. Whether the road is wonky or whatnot, I don't know if that necessarily matters, because the whole purpose of the plan is just to get a number of lots, not to engineer the entire thing so that it's a perfect plan. Otherwise, that would probably be the plan that they would go with. So I don't know if that clarifies the situation, but that's really the point of the conventional plan, just for the number of lots.
And Mr. Chair, if I may just add on to that, is it correct? My understanding is that our engineer has stated that that conventional plan complies with all of our bylaws. So, I mean, I hear the chief and I hear the concerns, and I also don't really like the two roads side by side that feed the same point. But again, I think that if it complies with our bylaws, and it's only used to determine the number of lots, then to me, I'd rather focus on the open space plan that's been presented to us, and make sure that we can make that the best one that we can, because I don't know, my opinion is I think it does comply with our bylaws for a conventional subdivision.
Yeah, if that's the case, and again, I'll let the chief kind of respond to that, but we're just going off what we see and what's been approved, and then be able to move from there. But chief, any thoughts?
Yeah, just yep. Just knowing we have a lot of challenging lots in the future, that's why I'm loving this dialogue. So I would just ask the question to the town engineers that approved it. At the point we're going to have a road touch side by side, that's what I heard today. The town bylaw restricts this distance of 500 feet with these, and I'm just trying to understand that somehow in that isn't, when you're creating this single road in length, it's just concerning to me. But I guess I'm okay if you're saying that it meets all the bylaws. I just feel like, boy, that's stretching what the intent of these bylaws are, even if it's in concept when the road touches. Because now it is to me it's a one-way road for the things I look for public safety. So I appreciate that opportunity. I realize this is a back and forth, not a perfectly identified point. So thank you.
That's fair, right? John, maybe one of those things where we have the conversation with the engineer that, the parties get together and just have that open dialogue that the chief talked about on that. Any other questions on vehicular or pedestrian traffic flow? Everybody good? No hands up? All right, snow removal and storage. I didn't see anything anywhere. Joe, what is the plan for that?
We didn't graphically depict any snow storage areas, but we positioned the houses off the roadway so when they plowed the road, there'd be adequate storage along the side.
Emergency access. Right. Chief, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in on that. Emergency access coming in off of Hayden Row.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the same principles. But the one thing in access here that getting to this part is the driveway's got a little longer, and that's what kind of why this is kind of rubbing me a little bit the wrong way. But they're not horribly long, but it's just not advantageous to us. But I'd say other than that, same principles.
Got it.
Mr. Chair, if I may jump in at this point. On other projects similar to this, we have considered residential sprinklers for the longer cul-de-sacs, and I think this would be an appropriate time to discuss that if that's something that the board would want to look into.
Nope, it's a fair point to bring up. I know we have on some of these developments where there are longer driveways. I'm not sure what defines longer, but if you look just on the plan, some of them look pretty long. In a situation like this, would a residential sprinkler, Chief, I assume that you would be in favor of something like that.
Yeah, I think that I can always share my assessments with you. So I think the fact that you have a single access really brings it up. So there are some advantages to this development that we haven't had in some of the other ones where it is going to have municipal water, but that's why I try to see if it's a one-way feed or things like that early on. My belief is that if you need to give a special permit for this, this is your opportunity to really, in a one-way in a 1,000-foot road, it's your opportunity to add a little more protection to the system as a mitigation to that.
That's something we could condition, John?
Yes, Chief and I actually just got a summary memo from town council saying that conditions for residential sprinklers are things, there is case law backing up that it is something that boards can require as part of a condition for a permit. So the board is able to condition any special permits they deem necessary to have residential sprinklers.
Board members, how do you feel about that?
Through the chair, I'd be in favor of that. We're talking 9 homes. The incremental costs can't be too great.
Through the chair, I'm completely supportive of that.
I've seen a lot of nodding heads. Okay. We can look to add that as a condition.
Although if I could just add quickly, I'm not sure the cost is incremental because I know sprinklers are expensive, but I do think that it's warranted here.
It's always incremental when it's not your money, Gary.
If may.
Mr. Nation.
Yes.
Yes,
Ron
sir.
Nation. The last project, we agreed to put sprinklers in. I believe it was for driveways over 500 feet because that was some kind of criteria involved there. This one here, some of these driveways looks to me like maybe 50 feet. A couple of 3 of them. Maybe there's a 150 footer. I just wonder what would have changed between a year ago and today, or 2 years, whatever. I can certainly understand for the 500 footers, but these seem like a pretty quick trip to the fire hydrant.
And where is the fire hydrant proposed in the concept plan?
In a 1,000-foot cul-de-sac, typically it would be halfway down the cul-de-sac and then one towards the end.
Okay, it's probably there. It's just so small I can't.
We showed two hydrants as part of this project. One near Station 8+50, and then another one by Station 6+0. Obviously, those locations can vary, but we're showing 2 fire hydrants to accommodate the 9 houses.
Yeah, approximately. All right, near the lot house there and there. So let me, Mr. Nation, maybe this isn't a good example to bring up a previous development, but where were the fire hydrants located in that development? And I just want to make sure from a board perspective, we're being consistent in applying a condition and not just throwing it out there without due cost.
So I'm sorry,
Yep.
Mr. Chair. I am mindful of what the chief pointed out was whether or not there was, some safety mechanism built in for the water line in having a loop or making sure there was sort of a redundancy there. So that would be a consideration for me as far as sprinkling the houses. And I think that what we're really experiencing is that we're, as a planning board, we're becoming more aware of it, largely because the chief has been so diligent about keeping pragmatic concerns in front of us from his perspective. We have indeed required sprinkling in units that were not 500 feet away from the road. I think we just did it on Leonard. I'm not sure. I don't remember.
To the applicant's point, I mean, there are a few homes here that the driveways are very short. it's always a balance, right? Trying to find the right mix. Chief, I see your hand because I can visually see it. So.
Thank you. So just to kind of talk about some of the assessment is, it's a 1,000-foot road that has one access point. And that in itself today versus 25 years ago is a bigger deal. And that's what we found out. And that's what I'm sharing with you. What also the capability of sprinkling this house didn't exist before. And what I brought to light, hopefully in the last couple of years and through what the work we've done, over 900 units up at Legacy Farms, is that they're able to sprinkle them very reasonable. And the myths of the disasters are gone. And the success stories, we've had 2 fires there that were extinguished in the room with just the contents, which would have been much worse fires. The residents were not in the occupants. They were right next door or down the street, and there would have been a lot more damage. In some of these, when you get into an open space design like this, the houses, they're not far apart. So it does affect your neighbor. The fire we had just across the street on Hayden Row was fully involved when I got there, and the neighbor's house, which is standard building code separation, was impinged on the side, and we just got the people out and extinguished the side of that house. So there are real threats, and that's where this one-way road in here is a problem. So I just think today we have a better chance, or I'm trying to influence the board and hopefully all of the builders, that we have a mitigation to these solutions, because this is what we're going to face in Hopkinton for the next 15 years. All the roads that were easy to put in and have plenty of loops and just naturally solve the problem are not going to come like that. I'm not trying to say don't build this. I'm just saying we have an opportunity right now. So thank you.
Yeah, Chief, thank you for that. I mean, that to me, the mitigation and the risk and the ability to have something in there to address that, like a home sprinkler, just makes it feel a lot safer.
Have Run
Yeah.
Nation.
So, Mr. Nation, I'll allow you a comment here, please.
Yeah. I guess I'd like to see what my internet is apparently not working too well here. I guess I'd like to see what the facts are. I get buyers constantly mentioning sprinkler systems, that they don't want them, that they don't want want to run the risk of having the house destroyed if the thing goes off. And I have no experience with this whatsoever, but I would like to see what the facts are on that. I assume insurance companies have all the facts on how many houses get destroyed versus with sprinkler system versus fire. And maybe we're chasing the wrong thing here. I don't know. That's
Yeah, I guess
I'd just like to see the science, I guess they call it. And,
yeah, through the
see where
chair.
it ends.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Nation. Chief?
Yeah, so the story I share with you is the units in Legacy North, and they're not having any problem selling them. The realtors are not telling me that people are running away because they have fire protection systems, and the success is demonstrated. And I've tried to, we have done these live fire demonstrations. I did one last fall for the town up at the high school, and there's really good data points. So not to beat a dead horse here in this meeting, but I'm happy to have the conversation. And I know it's got a bad reputation just from say a realtor perspective, but they're selling the units up at Legacy North.
Through the chair, I have a question.
Yes, Deb, please.
So my question, I guess, to the chief would be, if you were to have a trade-off, like in a large turnaround or a widened street, even if it was one way, would that be something that would be amenable versus, in comparison to a trade-off to a sprinkler system? And how big would that circle need to be?
Yeah, so I think the easy answer for me is have it be a conventional road. It has a way in and a way out. Have it have the standard road widths, have it have municipal water with fire hydrants. So basically you're ending up with like this, I guess you call it a approval not required lot afterwards. Then I think, I know at that point, that's why it's not in the building code when you get it quite to that point. These residential sprinklers are in the model building code, just Massachusetts hasn't accepted it yet. So I'm working my way into this, and we do the best we can.
So to kind of continue that conversation about sort of using a sort of a hybrid between a conventional and the OSPLD, would something like that, if we were to invent it, would something like that be acceptable? Because I could see because we saw the circle in the conventional was much larger, but the road didn't necessarily have to be that large. So if we did sort of a hybrid and we brought in water that would be amenable, would something like that work for you? And still, if they stay with, so that maybe their driveways were shortened, but their circle was enlarged, would something like that work for you?
Yeah, we could have the conversation. My experience working with the board is most of the scenarios are you want to reduce those things like the road width or the circle, and then the mitigation would be the sprinkler. So I think that's where you get into all the wetlands and what the future lots will be, including this one. So that's my guess at it, not to be argumentative.
No, true. No, I totally understand. It's a challenging site for sure.
All right. So any other comments from board members on this? Where I'm hearing people on this one is that I saw some fair number of head nods on the residential sprinkler, right, as a mitigation component to the proposal. Anybody feel differently on that? Rob?
Yeah, this is Rob. I think I started this off by saying I'm in favor of it, but the real unknown and what makes me really uncomfortable is I don't know but we don't have a bylaw that's like firm. The developer going into this project doesn't know that they're going to be required to put in sprinklers, and I don't know what it costs. Like I don't know if it's $1,000. I don't know if it's 500. I don't know if it's 20,000. And to add a burden when, like, if I could be educated, that would be really helpful. But I think just adding a burden without really knowing, like, hey, are we going to really diminish they bought this property with the plans to develop it, this type of plan, and then we're putting this cost burden when we don't know what it is, and we don't have a bylaw that says it's required. I am fully support of public safety, but can maybe Ron Nation or Joe maybe somebody can educate me on what the cost like per home would approximately be.
I'll entertain that question. If either Joe or Mr. Nation can provide a brief synopsis of that, but I will preface it by saying that the risks of the unknown fall upon the developer. So, Joe or Ron, feel free to comment back to Rob's question.
I'm sorry. I'm checking with Chris on the cost of a sprinkler.
So can I just based on my quick Google search, according to home fire sprinklers in Chelmsford, Mass, home fire sprinklers typically cost about $1.35 per square foot. So just for perspective, if these were a 3,000 square foot home, somewhere in that range, it'd be, $5,000 per house.
And if I can offer, just to be fair on the conversation, I would just plan on double that number, because I respect there is a cost factor here, but they're doing it about 4,300 when they're mass producing them up at Legacy, and we just a bunch of the houses that you have approved here, we're working with the builders and we're trying to get good price lines. $3 a square foot is a much more accurate number, I would guess. You do have municipal water here, so that helps keep the price down. And I think that that's a fair number for you to be assessing it by.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, if I could just comment, and I think appreciate the chief's additional comments there. And I was sort of thinking the same thing. I feel like in New England, things typically cost a lot more. Just my opinion, and again, I'm a big advocate for sprinklers, but I feel like that's something that we need to address through our bylaws. I feel like I struggle a little bit with kind of throwing this in now, just given that there's not a requirement for it, and I think we need to address it. But I think it might very well be the right thing to do, but I don't know. I'm struggling with kind of including it now at this point in the game.
And through the chair, we did research that because of the way the building code is, we can't write it in a bylaw right now, the way I understand it. So that's why we're talking. This is how the communities do it. They do it through planning board. They do it through zoning. And John's just as probably researched on this as I am. So this is the mechanism. I'm all for putting it in a bylaw, but that's part of the way the building code works and being able to assert it into a bylaw across the board.
Mr. Gelsich, any comments or thoughts?
No, none significant. I'll just reiterate that this is still an evolving topic, and we're still trying to, feel it out with the town council as to what the boards can do, whether we can put it in zoning bylaws, but not building code and all that fun stuff. So, like Chief said, I think that at this point, conditioning special permit approvals to include that is kind of the only way that we know we can go through this process now. We need to look at it a little bit more and figure out with town council how we can move forward, but this seems to be our only route at the time.
And Ron Nation, if I may.
Please, sir.
So I just get a number back of around $10,000. But that's a one-time. That's what the builder pays. I don't know what the maintenance is on these. Do they need to be inspected by the fire department on a yearly basis, a biannual basis? I don't know. No. There are so many things that I don't know about it. It's I just hate. I want to do.
Lost you, Mr. Nation.
That's going to damage the resale of it. That if it has to be inspected, they can't just turn it off if they don't like it. I don't know. There's so many things that I think the insurance companies know exactly what the numbers are, and I'd like to see them.
Right.
I guess I have a point of clarification for the chief as well.
Please, Deb.
In the past, sprinkler systems have, when they let loose all over the house. And they do a lot of destruction. But I do believe now it's heat censored so that only the area that is embedded with smoke is extinguished with the water. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, we have a really good example in town. That's why I referenced Legacy North. It's right in front of us. There was one system that the pipes failed. The owners literally left the country and shut the heat off in the winter. And so not only did the fire protection, but all of the municipal, all of their, what do you call it inside, just the rest of domestic water systems, they all failed. Yeah, they make them better. It needs to succeed. The things I can tell you that I know, and I got a lot of information for Chuck Joseph, is your insurance right now, they give you basically an 8 to 15% break if you have these systems in your house on your homeowners. So that's just an average that they gave us. It's out of a what they quote out of a national book. And I got that out of FIPS. I can forward this. The horror story. The head has to get activated. The horror stories are not happening in Hopkinton.
Thank you.
All right. So I'd like to be able to come to some resolution here on this one, and it feels like people are pretty divided right now. There's some cost or some concern around cost. To me, that's a cost that the developer will bear, right? Not the planning board. I think ours is to look at the bylaws and then address concerns from our public officials and where it's appropriate to put a condition such as a residential sprinkler. We are within our right to be able to do that. John, is that correct? Right. So I'll do a straw poll from the board members, how they feel about adding a condition here for residential sprinklers to this development.
I'm a yes.
Muriel, yes? Anybody else want to volunteer, or else I will voluntold folks? Mr. Trendle.
I'm a regretful no.
Mr. Benson.
I'm a yes with the with a little bit of hesitation as to other aspects that could be altered to make the chief happier with the space other than a conventional plan, the access other than a conventional plan. So I'm a little torn that we haven't fulfilled the complete definition of whether they should have sprinklers or not.
Okay, so is that a yes or a no?
Neither.
Okay. Rob Benson.
I am really torn. I agree with Gary. I'm a regretful no.
Jane?
Yes, I'm going to vote no, and I'll tell you why. I would like to see more data on it. I would like to see some facts that suggest how long of a distance a house should be from a access, an easily accessible fire hydrant. And, some other data. Maybe this is something we can kick back to the zoning and they can investigate it. So I'm a no at this point.
Got it. And Sundar.
I'm also a no, primarily because I think the cost burden is onerous on the applicant. There isn't, this isn't in the bylaw as a mandatory requirement. And I think the data is not clear in this particular plan of whether a requirement is there for the home sprinkler.
Very good. All right, and I am also a no on this one for the reasons that have been stated. Plus, there are also a number of fire hydrants. I believe 2 fire hydrants along the way. All right, so we will not be a condition for residential sprinklers.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Trendle.
Sorry, can I just make one more comment? And I do want to see how we can start to set expectations, though, and whether that be through a zoning change or a bylaw change, because I 100% agree with the chief's sentiment on the benefit of sprinklers. I just, and I think we need to find a way to set expectations that should be included candidly on a dead end street, if not more so. So I just wanted to say that in this situation, I feel like throwing this in the 11th hour is just unfair to the applicant, but I think that we as a board have to find some way to incorporate this in as we move forward.
Through the chair.
I would, Ms. Marlowe.
Hello. I am not going to comment on this development at all, but I did want to say that this is on Zach's agenda. We are planning on writing it into the subdivision rules and regs as an encouragement, and with some of the data that has been suggested, which is readily available, which I've already pointed out to all of you in previous meetings, and I will definitely do so, and obviously with John Gelsich's help, we'll keep on top of if and when we can actually make this a rule. But right now we're dealing with it as a guideline and suggestion. Okay.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. That's excellent.
So, Mr. Chair, can I also make a statement? I just sent an email to the chief. He probably hasn't gotten it yet. I don't know if he has a laptop in front of him. But I suggested I and his safety officers or deputy chief have a meeting in the near future and set some criteria down to say this is when sprinklers should be required, length of driveway, length of road, availability of water, that type of thing. And I'm sure those experts in the fire department can give me more ideas as to what the criteria would be. But then we can bring that forward to Zach and the planning board just for their consideration for future projects.
That's excellent. I do want to commend the chief for bringing this to the forefront. It's through your due diligence that we as a board and we as a town become safer in the long term. So thank you for your forethought and your diligence.
No, thank you. And Ron Nation has been very cooperative in a lot of stuff we work on. So I thank all of you.
All right. Any other questions? Oh, is there a comment? No? No.
Well, I was gonna make comment towards in cooperation with Mary's changes to the zoning bylaws that my offering to push forward a graphic representation of sizes of roads, length of turnarounds, and might also be a great guide for developers and builders to understand a little bit better what the criteria we're working with are. And then, take that further from both John and the chief and the safety officers discussions. We could carry that off graphically and people could see it very easily if they turn to the back of the amendments.
Awesome. That's excellent. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, Jen. Yeah.
Very good. Any other questions on emergency access? Right. Check that box. Open space preservation conservation restriction. Mr. Gelsich, I believe they adhere to both of those criteria, correct?
Correct. I don't know if we have clear understanding as to how the open space will be preserved, whether it's an HOA through a CR, and then if the CR is going to be handed off to the town or to HALT. So I'd like to hear that from the applicant.
Mr. Nation or Joe, do you have any insight onto that?
Typically, I have gone along with whatever the consensus seems to be with the town or the planning board or whatever. But I guess initially I'd like to, I'd put it with the homeowners association, but whatever. I don't know what the current trend is.
John, is there a suggestion here?
It doesn't really matter. If he wants to keep it with the homeowners association, he could, I think he then has to put a CR on it, and the CR could either go to HALT. HALT would want to accept it first, and I believe HALT likes to have some say as to how the open space is designed, because sometimes they don't like accepting open space that's not really usable for them. However, I think this might be a good situation where the town should be involved, whether the CR is handed over to the town or if the open space itself is handed over to the town. That might be something to consider.
So is that something we have to condition, or is that something that would be just picked up between yourself, HALT, and the applicant?
That's something the applicant would establish, and they would just have to, formalize it before the first building permit is issued.
And Mr. Chair, Jane has a comment as well. Which
I see it. Jane, you have a little bit of history here, please.
Sure. So I do have a little bit of information that the town is, through the town manager, might be working with the developer to come up with some easement language for trail access, because especially with the Upper Charles Trail Committee, we're concerned that if it is handed over to homeowners association, that we may not be able to get through there afterward if this were an option for the Upper Charles Trail. And it's premature, I think, at this point, but we don't want to rule it out if in fact later on we find that there is an avenue for the Upper Charles Trail to go through there. So we're kind of looking for some language for an easement, irregardless of whether it goes to HALT or to the town or, homeowners association, because we don't think we can tackle that bridge after that. So we'd like to see it as a condition through the planning board at some point in time. And I don't know if this is the appropriate place to put this in the conversation or someplace else further down the line.
So yeah, I was thinking that. John, is that something we would put in as a condition now, or would that be part of the definitive plan? And that would give Jane's group an opportunity to maybe further assess.
That's a good question. I don't know if this would necessarily be a condition, because if we don't have all the details, it would be tough to write a condition that would hold up without having to amend the decision itself. So if it's an easement, that could be something just placed on the definitive subdivision plan, once everything is worked out and agreed. And then if they need to condition the special permit, we could always amend it, I guess. But I think in this situation, since it's open space, and they would have to go through the subdivision process before they even get a building permit, they could work all of that out in the meantime and then hopefully have it resolved in the definitive subdivision process.
So through the chair, just for clarification, so just bringing up the conversation now doesn't necessarily put a deadline on it, except for the first building permit that has to be settled at some point in time before that.
So the open space, so as part of the OSLPD regulations, the open space has to be formalized and essentially deeded over, or the CR has to be put in place prior to the issuance of the first building permit, I believe. That says common open space shall be conveyed prior to the issuance of the first building permit. So they need to figure out what they're doing before they start building, but that doesn't mean it can't be handled now. It doesn't mean it can't be handled at the definitive subdivision plan. I'm just saying if there's to be a condition put on this special permit, we would have to know exactly what we want the condition to say. And I don't know if we're in that spot right now. I don't know if we're in that where we're ready for that.
Thank you. I'm fine with it now, letting it go. We'll wait and see we'll continue with the conversation behind the scenes.
Got it. All right. Historic features and resources. John, I think you had a comment at one point in there that we are good with that, correct?
Correct. There don't appear to be any historic resources.
I think I saw that. Yes, in rules of development appears to identify preservation of significant. No historic features have been identified on site. Check the box. Common open space is designed in accordance with the standards set forth in 210-113B. I believe that is the case. Yes, it conforms. Stormwater management. So on the concept plan and even on the conventional plan, there's the stormwater basin. There's one on the conventional plan, Joe, you got the two. And then on the concept plan, I saw the one, is the second one up by the circle?
Oh, there are two. Wow.
Two. Right.
One's on the east side and one's on the south side.
South side one, got it. And the east side one, that's right. I remember that one now. Any questions from the planning board members? Deb, I think you brought up a question at the last meeting about the one on the south side as it abuts up into the neighbors there. That's the very first one when you come in off of Hayden Road. Right.
Yeah, I guess my question was, what was it going to look like, and having less riprap than more, and having it more be like a natural rain basin that would have some more plantings that were indicative of the fields that are in the area would definitely be something I think that would be the neighbors and the people who live there would be attracted to. Is that something that's possible, Joe, with the size of the basins and the level of water that's necessary to be trapped?
I think we could mitigate some of the visual impacts. We're going to encourage a grass bottom, perhaps the berm that separates our initial treatment and then the final infiltration. Perhaps we could reduce the stone associated with that. So the forebay could also be grassed. I have a hard time imagining that we'll eliminate the stone spillway, but we can certainly shape that, position it so that there's not that, it doesn't jump out at you, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that we'll be able to mitigate some of the visual impacts from the construction.
Through the chair, what would be the depth of what would be the approximate, I know it's early in the plan, but what would be the approximate depth of it at this point, to your knowledge?
It's hard to imagine that our water table is tremendously low there. So imagine we won't get a deep cut, steep side slopes, that sort of thing, get more volume. So something low and wide, so maybe a couple of feet deep, and maybe create an earthen berm to get the storage. So generally maybe a couple of feet down and then 1 or 2 feet up to create the storage volume we need.
So would there be fencing required and street guards on either side of the street required?
Too early to tell. Generally, the planning board imposes conditions regarding plantings for screening. The side slopes could be set gradual so that there isn't I guess, a tremendous need to worry about the safety concerns, something tumbling into the basin, if you will, and not being able to get out. So we can manage some of those, but generally the impetus for screening, fencing comes from you folks. So as long as we're all on the same page that we're trying to have this element of the stormwater fit the landform, then sure, we can head off in that direction and design that way.
Great. So one more question through the chair.
Yes.
So is that the north side, the one that's behind the houses? Is that one also as shallow? And would it be more in replication of the forest? And is that even possible? I mean, because right now it's forested land and it's going to be extended into that natural boundary. So I'm just wondering, has there been designed a rain basin that would be more indicative of the forested land?
I have a hard time picturing your existing trees in that uplands area, maples and oaks, that would survive in a wet environment. I can see plantings around the top that could be varied, away from your strict, your evergreens, away from your needled varieties. But in the basin, there would have to be something, shrubs come to mind, would be a more likely alternative than can this large oak survive in an environment that doesn't suit its species. So I guess we could entertain thoughts about wetlands tolerant plants in and around it, but there will be a change.
Okay, but to your knowledge, it's going to be a safe change versus not a really deep basin.
I just have a hard time picturing that we'll get deep cuts in any of those spots and then maintain the necessary separation to groundwater. So I think we'll be shallower.
Nice. Okay, that's what I wanted.
More shallow than we will be deep.
Good. Cool. Thank you.
That's helpful. Hey, Joe, there was just one comment from Beta on this, on stormwater basins. This was OS6, where they talk about, they're asking for a % of the open space that the basins will occupy. And then there's a further comment in there around 2-113, and I won't read it in its entirety, but the bottom line is they're looking at the area of the detention basins and ponds not exceed 5% of the common open space parcel, which clearly this is not. But I would like to get some clarity just in terms of, how large do you anticipate or expect these stormwater basins to be?
We would be in line with the maximum set aside in that guideline. Without soil testing, without an in-depth study, it's hard for me to say it's going to be X by Y. The idea would be to pull together a stormwater element that meets the requirements, that is in line with the practices, and something that Phil and Stephen over at Beta are going to go for. So I'm sorry to hedge on that, but I think it's too early to be able to tell you exactly what shape they're going to take, how deep they're going to be. But we'll certainly live with that maximum size contained in the regulations.
Oh, yeah. And John, is that something we would then review on the definitive plan?
I'm sorry, I missed that, Mr. Chair.
So we're just talking about, the size of the stormwater basins. And then I think I'll dovetail Deb's comment on that in terms of looking at, appropriate screening or plantings for both the basin on the south side as well as on the east side there.
It can be considered in the subdivision plan. It can be considered now. It's up to the board as to when they feel it would be appropriate to discuss.
Board members, anybody have a strong thought? Jane, got your
I had one thought as a follow-up to Deb's. If you drive by Legacy Farms, they've done a wonderful job with small bushes and plantings that kind of mask the stormwater drain system, azaleas, some other small bushes, as Joe referred to, water tolerant, low growing shrubs do a lot to mask these systems.
I'm feeling like this could be an easy, this could be a condition that we could put in place now, just to have it, stormwater basin screenings, plantings, and appropriate water tolerant shrubbery, something along those lines.
Yeah, something that makes sense.
All right, I will have that as a condition. Any other questions on that before we move on? Any other questions or issues on stormwater management for the group? Data that I saw. No hands up. I'm going to keep going. 7.4, common open space is designed in accordance with the standards set forth in 210.113C. These include buffer areas and landscaping. Mr. Gelsich, I think we're good on that.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Ms. Kramer, floor.
Yeah, I just want to, I don't want to assume anything. I assume that the billboards that would now be in the open space would no longer be in the open space. They'll be gone, but I wanted to ask.
Mr. Nation or Mr. Marquardt?
I don't have an answer for that. I'm not sure what the lease situation is on them, or I'm not sure how that works, but I like them.
You would be one.
I think they're a landmark.
They might almost be historic.
Yeah.
Oh, ooh, there you go.
No, it's true.
Your 10-year wait before you can take them down.
In all seriousness, I don't think you can combine uses. They're not a residential use. So I think that we need to clarify that.
John, is that the case?
Good question.
It doesn't matter to what. I answered. I don't know what the lease is.
What about them being a historic element? How long have they been there? It'd be like the Sitco sign in Boston.
They've probably been there since the 50s or 60s or something. I don't know. Nancy Reagan missed them.
There might be some validity to keeping them.
John, I mean, to Muriel's comment, is that something that, I mean, it doesn't sound like the applicant knows what the current status of those are.
I do not.
Right. So, I mean, is it in our bylaw, or is it, Muriel, you're saying that it is a.
So it's just basic zoning. I don't think you can have different uses on a single piece of property that way without specialized permission.
So so section 210.113B5 says common open space may be used for active and passive recreation, conservation, forestry, agricultural, natural buffers. And this is the key one: structures necessary for approved uses. If these are old enough where they are a grandfathered use, that is something I would want the zoning enforcement officer to weigh in on as to what their determination would be if they comply with that that section.
So is that something that can be done outside of this, John, or do we need to make a condition on the billboards?
I think it would be, the determination would either be that they are structures associated with an approved use and therefore can remain, or they're not, and they would either have to be removed or the special permit would not move forward. Or the special permit would be approved, but it couldn't be acted upon. They wouldn't issue any building permits because it would be essentially a non-compliant thing on the special permit.
But through the chair, if I'm hearing correctly, it sounds like the applicant doesn't, as long as there's not a lease requirement or something, that doesn't really care if they're there or not. So, I mean, I don't know if is it worth us having a lot of debate around this now, if it's something that, at some point he's going to have to address in order to build lots.
Correct. Right. Yep.
From a planning board perspective, it is our job to make sure they're in compliance with zoning.
Yes, understand, but I guess.
So we should condition this decision upon a favorable ruling or whatever.
That's why I asked the question, should it be a condition?
Yeah.
And John,
I think that would be appropriate.
You're going to have to help me wordsmith that one.
Or we need to clarify whether they're historical, in the nature of what they are. I mean, because we passed that one up and we said, hey, there's no historical landmarks. Well, there actually is. And they actually
can a billboard that changes be historical? I would doubt that.
It can. Yes, signage is historical. You look at the Citgo.
It's not the same billboard year after year.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
can I interrupt?
Mary Jane, yes, ma'am, please.
Hi, this is Mary Jane Conley, 261 Hayden Rose Street. The lease will be terminated upon the sale of the land. The billboards will be going.
Oh,
great.
Okay.
That settles that. Let's make sure we note that in the condition, though, if you're amenable to that, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Very good. Selling and gone. Okay, any other questions on the buffer areas and landscaping? John, anything else from your perspective?
No.
Okay, 7.5, the parcel could be developed as a conventional subdivision under existing local, state, and federal land use regulations. John, I believe we came to the agreement that that indeed is the case. Any questions on 7.5 from the planning board members? No. 7.6, open space and landscape preservation development provides for efficient use and delivery of municipal and other services and infrastructure. I believe we've talked about this. John, any other comments on that? I didn't see anything else from Beta, I don't believe.
I'm not sure if it's been answered, but with Dave not being here, I'm going to ask the question to the applicant to confirm that utilities will be underground.
Yes. Underground.
Well played, John.
And is that the case, Joe or Mr. Nation?
Yes, they'll be underground.
Got it.
Ron.
Very good, thank you. All right, any other questions on open space landscape preservation? The group, no. 7.61, utilities, water, sewer. It's municipal water, correct, Mr. Nation?
I believe we're going to have municipal water and hopefully sewer as well.
Hopefully sewer. What is hopefully sewer mean? Are you petitioning to for sewer as well?
Yes.
And what is the timetable or time frame to hear back on the sewer piece?
Joe?
Well, it'll have to come from Mr. Westerling or Mr. Kamalo. I think the site would support on-site septic, but municipal sewers certainly would be preferred from a construction standpoint and a permitting approval standpoint of the Board of Health. But when Mr. Westerling and Mr. Kamalo would grant that decision, I can't answer that tonight.
Got it. But Plan B is feasible with septic on site?
Yes.
And Mr. Chair, that's what's in the plans currently. Yeah. It does identify septic.
Yeah. No, did Beta have any comments on that? Okay. Any other comments? And I'll open this up to board members first, and then to the broader audience of anybody from the public that would like to weigh in as well. Board members, anything else? No? Other members? Deb Feinberg, I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand. Sorry.
I know it's been decided that those billboards are coming down, but I just want to say I have a moment of respect for billboards. There's been a lot of studies done across the United States architecturally as to the definition and importance of sign markers and wayfinders. And they are more and more threatened by development. So being the fact that it's probably the only billboard that we have in Hopkinton, it's really not outside our parameters to think about whether it's important to respect that or not. And that's that's all I want to say. That I actually like those billboards. That's
two.
So I just don't know where you go with that. Is there any directioning we can, can we define what the age they are before we decide that they're totally removed, or can we talk with the historic committee or?
So,
Mr. Trundle.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge here is that those are, they're maintained for advertising as part of a business. So even if we want to preserve them, what exactly are we preserving? Unless Hopkinton is going to, unless someone's going to take it upon themselves to put advertisements up there or maintain a business of some kind, at which point we have this issue with use
dual purpose
of not. So to me, it's just, I don't think it's something that personally I would want to attach to this review. I don't think it's relevant or applicable.
Yeah, it feels like, I mean, I like the billboards as well, but I think it feels like it's out of scope for the purposes of what we're working on, what we're trying to do here. But Deb, comments so noted. So thank you.
So I don't know. I really don't know the history of them and who has maintained them. Can Mary and Jane enlighten us?
Through the chair, Mary Jane, if you have any historical comments?
Okay, I mean, basically they've been, they're owned by, they leased the space from my sisters and I, and then before that was my dad, and before that my grandfather. And basically they maintain them, they maintain the area around them. And they're run by Clear Channel. And basically we provide the land.
Very good.
Do you have photos and representations of what they've been in the past, as far as ones you've liked or haven't liked, or whether they've been controversial or not? I mean, so that at least we have some kind of history in the library or something, even if they do get taken down, that we have some kind of.
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right. Just wondering. Thank you, Mary Jane. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. I'm sorry.
So just having through the chair, having lived in town for over 35 years, they've looked very much the same for that whole time, just different advertisements. I would not think the vast majority of town would consider them an attractive landmark, would be my opinion.
right.
One more thing. They're
Mr.
facing
Benson.
south. Maybe we could throw some solar panels up there.
Oh.
Oh, that was bad. Sorry.
Mr. Durso somewhere is smiling.
Saying, yes, yes. Do that.
Actually, I don't want to waste time, but actually, there are some really great solar advertisements in old historic posters in a format of old historic silk screened poster images selling early. So never mind. That's just for edification. Sorry.
No worries at all. Very good. Any other final comments from
Yeah.
Jane?
Just one quick practical question. If for some reason the town, the developer did decide to keep them, whose responsibility would it be for maintaining and, finding advertisements? Would it be the homeowners association? And would they really be crazy about doing that? Or could that be carved out for somebody else? I'm not sure.
Actually, it could be a fundraiser. It could be some put as a fundraiser for schools, or yeah, it could be maybe town generated. I mean, that would be kind of an incentive business wise. And we've been talking about looking for sort of incentive businesses to help stir business downtown. It could be an events board. Yeah, it could be kind of effective. They could even be updated, but yeah, again, the homeowners association would have to be part of that question because they wouldn't want them to be obtrusive or divisive or that kind of thing. But,
right.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would like to remind the board too that we have no control over the content of signs,
Exactly.
and they could be a lot of things.
Very good. Thank you, Muriel. Any other comments from members of the public? Or final comments from the board members before we vote on the waivers? All right, so I believe the only waiver in place or being requested is for the 100-foot buffer. I'm sorry, 100-foot, it's just a buffer waiver on the pinch point to the Eddy property. Right. So, John, the proper procedure here is ask for a motion on the waiver. So I will entertain a motion to allow the waiver as stated in.
Mr. Chair, you may want to also add to the motion as shown on the plan.
I was going to say, as shown, I was going to read it here, but as shown on the plan.
So moved.
Second.
Gary has moved the motion and seconded by. Did anybody second it? Jane Moran, right? So is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair, in full disclosure, I'm going to vote no. I expect it to pass, but I don't know. But I would like to make sure that we document in the findings why we, if we approve a 20-foot waiver, why we chose to do that.
Okay. So that is fair. Rob, do we discussed this at length? There was going to be additional screenings put in by the developer around that. Also, do we leave it at 20 feet or we try to move it to 30 feet as Mr. Nation had stated that he could do? So, I mean, I think giving a little bit more space to the abutter with additional screening and noting that fact that the abutter felt that that was amendable to him. I'd like to make that information noted in the waiver. Muriel, does that address your concerns?
In the findings, I think it's important.
I'm sorry, in the findings.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I think it's important to note that the single affected homeowner was amenable to the buffer.
And that there is a and that this proposal has less impact on the existing wetlands on the site.
I think that that's not our job. I just don't think that that helps us in the findings. I just don't think that that's, it's fine if it goes into people's personal thought process.
You know, I mean, I don't know. We have to get to a compromise at some point, because if we dig in and only vote on one side and Concom only does one thing, then we never end up somewhere in the middle. So we have to, and I think at the end of the day, that, at least for me, that weighs into my consideration. I think we're balancing a lot of different factors here. And personally, I think it's worth referencing all the different factors that we're assessing.
Yeah, I think it's a pragmatic approach that we see. Any other discussion? All right, if not, I will take a voice vote. Deb Feinberg. You're on mute, Deb.
Deb Feinberg, yes.
Very good. Jane Moran.
Jane Moran, yes.
Muriel.
Muriel Kramer, no.
Sundar.
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Rob Benson.
Rob Benson, yes.
Gary Trundle.
Gary Trundle, yes.
And Fran DeYoung is a yes. All right. The next item up. Discuss conditions for approval. So the conditions for approval are noted in 210.2. And I think I probably should read those all out in addition to the conditions that we added, correct?
Mr. Chair, I have
Yes,
a
sir.
proposal for you. I'm wondering if you would like me to read the existing conditions that are here, so that you can have a few minutes to jot down your thoughts on the new conditions that we are adding.
I would accept your offer. It seems like you've been in my shoes before.
Yes, I have.
All right. So please, on page 8, 210.2, proposed conditions.
Yep. So number 1, a town clerk certified version of the special permit shall be recorded at the Middlesex County Registry of Deeds prior to the issuance of a building permit for the work that is subject to the decision. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause quickly after each one, and if people have comments or issues, then they can speak up. The Director of Municipal Inspections inspects projects under construction for compliance with the approval special permit decision. This includes the driveway, roadway, and infrastructure construction shown on the plan. If the Director of Municipal Inspections determines at any time before or during construction that a registered professional engineer or other such outside professional is required to assist with the inspections of the stormwater management system or any other components of the special permit, the applicant shall be responsible for the cost of these inspections. All construction activities shall adhere to applicable local, state, and federal laws and regulations regarding noise, vibration, dust, sedimentation, and use of, interference with, or blocking of town roads. The applicant shall be responsible for mitigating all construction-related impacts, including erosion, siltation, and dust control. The applicant shall maintain all portions of any public way used for construction access free of soil, mud, or debris deposited due to use by construction vehicles associated with the project, and shall regularly sweep such areas as directed by the Director of Municipal Inspections in consultation with the DPW Director. Number 5, the applicant shall regularly remove construction trash and debris from the site in accordance with good construction practice and the construction management plan. No tree stumps, demolition material, trash, or debris shall be burned or buried on the site. Number 6, all exterior lighting within the development project, whether shown in the approved plan or required by the Massachusetts State Building Code, shall be shielded, directed downward and not upward or outward, and shall not spill onto adjacent property. Number 7, all fixed mechanical equipment on the site shall be screened from view from the ground. Such screening shall be sufficient in the opinion of the Director of Municipal Inspections. Number 8, a completed signed construction management plan shall be submitted to the planning board prior to the commencement of any site work. The applicant shall also submit a revised full site plan set, which incorporates all the modifications made during the public hearing process and any required in this decision. Number 9, erosion and sedimentation control measures shall be implemented during the construction period in accordance with the approved site plan and the construction management plan. If they are found to be inadequate, the applicant shall immediately correct any deficiencies. Number 10, the planning board shall receive a sign-off confirming that the site contractor and any major subcontractors have received the construction management plan prior to the commencement of any site work. Number 11, construction may occur only between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and Saturdays between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. pursuant to Chapter 141, Article I of the Town of Hopkinton General Bylaws. Article 1 or Article I, I'm not quite sure. Number 12, the applicant shall submit final as-built plans to the planning board prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. A completed signed SWPPP shall be provided to the planning board prior to issuance of building permits. Number 14, the applicant developer shall provide the principal planner with a project point of contact and contact information prior to the issuance of a building permit. The point of contact information shall be kept current throughout correspondence to the principal planner until the final certificate of occupancy is issued or construction is otherwise considered complete. And that's the end of the list we have here. Mr. Chair, if I may ask a question of our planner.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember do we need to include a bond at the special permit, or is that within the definitive subdivision plan?
So we can include a bond at the definitive subdivision plan. I mean, it can be done here as well, but we can also do it at definitive subdivision.
All right. I also had 3 conditions to add to that. John, you may need to help me here on a couple of them. The first one is provide a single wetland crossing that is consistent on both the conventional plan and the concept plan. The second was provide additional planting, parentheses, trees and shrubs that increase the screening on the buffer area with less than 100 feet, which abuts the Eddy property. And the third was provide basin screenings around the basins that shall include appropriate planting and water tolerant shrubs and bushes.
Mr. Chair, we need a condition about the billboards, I believe.
I had that down, Muriel, but since the applicant mentioned that those were, or
the landowner, the current landowner, who we have no control over in this process.
Correct. That they were going to the new homeowner that they were going to be gone. So what would the condition that you want to see on that one?
We understand that
They're going to be removed?
The billboards will be removed in their
No,
entirety.
I would not agree with that. I think we need to do more findings as to whether they're historic in nature and what they're, and so I think we need to go to the Historic Commission to determine that. And so we need a little more information before we can make a condition. I'm all for taking them down if they're not historic, but if they're historic, I think they should be preserved.
So John, help me out here, right? So billboards, historic billboards.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question in a different way? Because I think, I guess, maybe it's probably a fair question to ask the Historic Commission to evaluate or make a determination on that. But I guess I'm just wondering if, again, I know we talked about this briefly, but do we need to take a position on this for the special permit, or is this something that we can address at a later point, with the definitive subdivision plan?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Gary, through the chair. I think that I'll do a little bit of homework, and when we revisit this again, we'll have a lot more information, and we could determine if it's even necessary to get involved.
So would this be something that we would take up as part of the definitive plan?
Yes.
So, Mr. Chair, I would actually propose a condition that says the existing billboards on site shall be removed prior to the issuance of the first building permit unless found to be a historic resource by the Historic Commission.
And approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals.
That sounds great.
If they're pre-existing non-conforming or grandfathered, I don't think the zoning board has anything to do with it. don't think anybody would even, you wouldn't even have to go there. But I don't know.
So use variances do not go with the property, Mr. Nation, unless that has been specifically prescribed by the Zoning Board of Appeals, which I doubt that has happened.
But were these granted under a use variance or are they pre-existing non-conforming?
We don't know.
I bet they're pre-existing non-conforming. I
They
think
may
there's,
be. But I don't know that transfers with property. I don't know.
Well, to Deb's point, we need to do some more research.
Yeah.
Right. So
Sounds like it.
if we put the condition in there, right, that prior to the first housing permit being issued, that we're able to come to a resolution on the billboard.
I am perfectly comfortable with language that says the Zoning Board of Appeals approval if necessary.
You could add that.
I'm very fine with that.
So I didn't write that down. John, is that something that's repeatable?
1 second and I'll have it. All right, so it says the existing billboards on site shall be removed prior to the issuance of the first building permit unless found to be a historic resource by the Historical Commission. Is it the Historical Commission or is it Historic Commission?
Historic Commission.
Historic Commission. And the Board of Appeals if necessary.
Thank you, Paul.
All right. Any other conditions? So there was one piece, before we move on to the standards and findings, there was one piece that I missed under 2.7, which is that lot 4 appeared not to provide the required frontage. And I know is that still the case? It says 75 feet is required and 56 feet has been provided.
Chair, could you repeat that? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Yeah, under 2.7, Muriel, it just says comments received, and then a lot of it is struck out, but there is a bullet point in there that is not struck out that says lot 4 appears not to provide the required frontage of 75 feet, and it only has 56 feet of frontage. And I want to review that and see, is that indeed the case? And I'll bring that up. Maybe Joe has a comment on that.
While you were speaking, I put the ruler to the plan. Corner to corner is 75 feet. Around that curve, it would have to exceed 75 along that arc. The straight line is 75, so it must be 70.
It's going to be more than that, right? If my math.
Exactly. So I imagine it's a typo in the zoning table.
It's on the arc, it measures 95 feet.
Perfect. All right, so then we're fine on that. I saw that there. I just did not want to let that go by.
If we are revising this plan and submitting additional copies, could fix that zoning table so that everything in the files is appropriate.
All right. So Gary mentioned the conditions of approval. We've added some of the conditions of approval. Any other questions on the conditions? No. All right. 10.1 and 10.2 are review the decision criteria and discuss the special permit findings. John, I think we've kind of gone through a lot of those questions. Just trying to see. What else would need to be discussed there? Am I missing anything, John, in terms
Nope, I think that's just a catch-all in case there are still questions about the decision criteria.
Okay. Any other public comments? We'll move on. All right, seeing none, looks like next here is I will entertain a motion to vote to close the public hearing.
So moved.
So
Do,
moved.
do we
Jane.
need to, through the chair, do we need to vote on the conditions or?
It looks like that's, if I kind of follow the list here, Rob, it looks like that's next on the list. We vote first on the approval of the permit, second on the vote on the findings, third on the conditions.
But do we
But it
close the
seems
public
that-
hearing first?
It seems kind of strange, but that's the way it's outlined, written in the outline.
I'm good if that's appropriate.
Rob, I mean, John, is that a typo there?
Nope. So you can close the public hearing. That just means that the public can't provide any more comment. The board can still discuss for, a couple more meetings if they wanted to. It's not uncommon for boards to close the public hearing and then the next meeting go through the decision. So
Okay.
it's okay.
All right.
So if I may, on the same note, we don't have to close the hearing before we vote. And just my opinion, I think it's easier to leave it open because that way, if the public or somebody does want to comment, or if we have a question, then it just makes it a little easier to do so.
Yeah, I'll entertain that. Gary, I think that's historically how we've done it. I think that's probably what piqued Rob's initial comment, and it always, to me, it always provided a sense of finality once everything is done to close the public hearing. So we'll leave the public hearing open, and if there's no objections to that, we'll vote on the permits being requested. The first is 13.1, voting on the approval of permit. And I believe that's 2.8, correct, John? Approval for the OS LPD special permit?
So the findings, the motions for these votes are in 2.9.
2.9, okay.
2.8 just explains what the actual, the vote is needed. So it's a
Mr.
2/3
Chair.
vote for a special permit.
I move that the board finds that the proposed open space and landscape preservation development conforms to the provisions of Article 617, that all applicable criteria and standards set forth in the zoning bylaws, Chapter 210, have been satisfied, and the granting of the special permit will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the zoning bylaws, Chapter 210.
I'll second that.
All right, there's a motion on the table which has been seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, this would be the time for any additions related to the buffer waiver, if they wanted to be added.
So we have the waiver, and did we not identify the conditions on that waiver? Am I getting out of?
There are no conditions associated with the waiver. It's just that in the findings, there had been discussions from this board saying we need to find that the waiver was granted for this reason.
Yes, minimal impact to the Eddy residents / the abutter. The second is incremental additional screenings, and it's balancing the, I'm sure this we can add the last one, trying to minimize the impact to both the abutter as well as the open space / wetland. Am I missing anything there, or is that kind of capture it for the board members?
Works for me.
All right. Any other findings?
Ron Nation. So when, I guess I got lost on the final approval. Was it the vote tonight is, you're leaving the hearing open?
But we're just leaving the hearing open to the end, but we're actually going through the process
Oh,
of
okay, I'm sorry.
for
Okay.
the approval for the special permit, Mr. Nation. So anything else on the finding? No? All right, so if there's no other discussion, we will go through a roll call vote. Deb Feinberg,
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Jane Moran,
Jane Moran, yes.
Sundar. You're on mute, Sundar.
Sundar Sivaraman, yes.
Rob Benson,
Rob Benson, yes.
Gary Trendle,
Gary Trundle, yes.
Muriel Kramer,
Muriel Kramer, yes.
and Fran DeYoung is a yes. All right. Next. Do we have to vote on the findings, John, or has that already been kind of covered under the incorporated in the permit?
That's what we just did, I think.
Yeah, didn't you just vote on the finding?
Yeah, that's what we just did. Now we have to vote the special permit.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll move that the board grant a special permit under Article 17 of the zoning bylaws, granting the waivers for the buffer zone as previously described and subject to the conditions as discussed tonight, period.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, roll call vote. Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Jane Moran?
Jane Moran, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Rob Benson?
Rob Benson, yes.
Gary Trundle?
Gary Trundle, yes.
And Muriel Kramer?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
All right, and Fran DeYoung is a yes. All right. And lastly, it looks like to vote on the conditions that were identified by Mr. Trundle, augmented by conditions that I added as well.
Those were included in the vote that was just taken.
Why is it I'm out of order? So I apologize, but I think, does that cover everything?
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second, Rob.
Muriel has entertained the motion. Rob has seconded it. Deb Feinberg?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Jane Moran?
Jane Moran, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Rob Benson?
Rob Benson, yes.
Gary Trundle?
Gary Trundle, yes.
Muriel Kramer?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Fran DeYoung is a yes.
Nice job, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Nation, Mr. Marquardant, best of luck to you in the next phase of the development. I appreciate all the support from my fellow board members and members of the public. And this time I yield the chair to Mr. Trundle.
All right. Thank you, Mr. DeYoung, and appreciate you taking the lead on that one. Just so people know, December 21st, our agenda, we have a minor site plan for accessory solar at 146 East Main Street. We have a bond discussion for Hopkinton Highlands 3. We have Deer Ridge Estates, otherwise known as Lincoln Street. And we have a site plan for 0 South Street, of which we are going on the site walk this Saturday at 9:30. So again, a full agenda. But on that note, if there's no further comments, I will entertain a motion to adjourn for this evening.
So moved. So moved.
Second.
All right, and assuming no further discussion, we'll take a vote. Mr. Benson?
Rob Benson, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane?
Jane Moran, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Fran?
Fran DeYoung, yes.
And Gary Trundle is a yes. And special thanks for Mary for staying with us all this time.
I was thinking the
Since she
same
had recused
thing.
herself from the hearing. So
It was very tempting to leave.
so we will see you all Saturday. Yeah, have a good couple of days and stay safe and warm and dry in the snow.
Happy
Night,
snow.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you very much for your time.
Jeff and Fran, could you stay on, please?
Yeah.
Just have a quick question.
I'm in trouble now.
No. The
okay.
the findings for the waiver, I missed the third one. It was so I've got, with the exception of the waiver granted for buffer width, as the proposed design will provide additional plantings in this area to screen the abutter. The waiver will allow for preservation of wetland resource area. And what was the third piece?
Wasn't around the basin,
Yeah, the basins.
right? It was the additional screening shall include the appropriate plantings and water tolerant shrubs and bushes to adequately screen the basin.
All right, so I'm going to write that as an additional plantings will be installed to screen the stormwater basin.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
And I
Thank
think, Deb brought it up. I think it's having the appropriate, I appreciate the appropriate type of plantings relative to the, contiguous, shrubs and bushes that are there.
Yep.
Makes a big difference.
She's on mute.
Yeah, it does make a big difference, especially when you're going from fields to forest.
Okay. I don't want to encourage any more discussion because this is outside of the meeting, but thank you all.
Very good. Thanks, John.
Take care.
Thanks for the guidance.
Bye.
Have a good night, everyone.
Have a good
Good night,
night.
all.
Bye.